on the technology, so sorry.
Michelle, you want to let's start the Zoom attendees?
Yes. Do you mind just taking that and then emailing it to me or something after? And maybe just keep it open because that might expand. Can people on Zoom hear us in the room?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Great. And we can hear you on Zoom loud and clear. Excellent. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going to start with some of the usual things, which are commissioner introductions. My name is Kasha and I am chair of the Parks Commission.
Stephanie Hunt, Parks Commissioner.
Emily Donaldson, Parks Commissioner.
Thank you, Frasco, Parks Commissioner.
Andrew
Brewer, Parks Commission.
And Alec Ellsworth, Parks Director.
And why don't we also introduce dog committee people as well?
Sure. Robin Govan, Dog Committee. Dana, oh no. Diana Green, Dog Committee. Dana Dwennell Yardley, Dog Committee. Jessa Barnard, Dog Committee.
Excellent. And you introduced staff. Okay. And Kara is online on staff. And for those of you, especially online, does anybody have a piece of, you have a bright yellow piece of paper. Can you pass that around the room for people to write their names on? So if you're in the room, if you don't mind writing your name, we'll just add your name to the minutes. For those of you online, we can see some of your names. Sometimes online gives you a first name, not a last name, or you have a couple people joining you. If you don't mind just dropping who's with you into the chat, that will help us just collect everybody's names for the minutes. So let's do the commissioner point of order type work. We have our May 7th agenda and April 9th minutes. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve the May 7th minutes and today is May 7th, so I can approve those minutes.
May 7th agenda and April 9th minutes.
That's what I'll make a motion for.
Okay. Andrew seconds. Any discussion?
Just that I'd like to just take a minute to figure out meeting logistics for the rest of this month if possible. Like there's next Monday, but then we have a regularly scheduled meeting to decide if and when we want to do that and what the agenda is. So I can get that out. That'd be great.
Should we add that to the end of this? You're suggesting
Beginning and whatever you want. Yeah.
Let's add that to the end of this because this meeting may inform some of that. So that's good. Okay. Okay. So, here, Alec isn't on the commission. Does somebody want to suggest adding that to the end of the agenda?
Let's add discussions for the rest of the month's meetings to the end of the agenda.
Seconds.
Okay, so, all right, so with that amendment of talking about future meetings at the end of this agenda, any further discussion? And can I get a vote? We've already approved, seconded. I think we can get a vote as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Next, we have public comment for items not on the agenda. I think most of us are here today to talk about dogs and Hubbard Park. If you are here today to talk about something else, now is your moment to shine. All right. Hearing none, we're just going to move right along. So we'll get to the meat of why we are here tonight, which is to talk about dogs and Hubbard Park and people. I want to just open kind of similarly to the way we started a couple meetings ago, that just remind everybody that we're all here because we love our parks, we love our people, we love our community, we even love our dogs. Most of us have dogs. I had to say goodbye to my dog last fall. It's still very sad to me. We have heard from so many of you. It's been actually pretty amazing how many people have emailed, posted a front porch forum, all of that. we have been paying attention. I want you all to know that it's very hard to respond to the sometimes dozens of emails a day. If you don't get a personal response, if you get no response, if you just get Alex, hey, we heard from you. Thank you for doing all of those. We've seen what you have to say. And really appreciate everybody's comments and participation now, and also going back a couple of years now from when we were doing the Hubbard and North Branch management plans and taking people for walks in the park and doing surveys.
You're on mute for Zoom. It just turned off.
I think is that Orca Media?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my bad. I muted everybody because there were some people not muted, but I also muted you. I won't do that either.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we heard most of what was said. It was just that last moment.
Thank you for letting us know. We had no idea. And as a piece of these public engagement, a piece has, of course, also been the 2017 vote that the city had. And I just want to surface that as something that also is what brings us together. That was kind of a black and white thing. It was a 50-50 split. And I know the Parks Commission at the time did say, hey, like, we don't really think this needs to be solved by a 50-50 split. We need compromise. There's a lot more nuance here. This isn't going to solve the problem. And it turns out that that vote didn't really solve the problem. So that's why we're here tonight, to bring in the nuance and the really deep conversation to find something different than just a yes or no, which I don't think is going to work for the community. So what we're going to do tonight is open for public comment from all of you in the room and online. There have been a lot of opportunities for public comments over the course of this via email. The last couple meetings just really focused on this issue. What there hasn't been a lot of is opportunity for parks commissioners and dog committee people to talk to each other. And just so everybody knows kind of logistics, we all love our open meeting laws. We're so grateful to them. But it means that as commissioners, we cannot talk to more than one person at a time. And so it makes it really hard to collaborate. It makes it really hard for all of us to sit in with the dog committee and say, hey, how could we work out this challenge together? And so we would love for that to be the primary focus tonight, as having that conversation, because we don't get that outside of this room. We step out of that room and we don't get to have that conversation. And so I do want to start by opening it for public comment. We're going to do that for a maximum of 15 minutes and ask people to hold to 2 minutes each. And I also want to say that if you've emailed us, if you've called us, if you've posted a front porch forum, we've seen those things. And especially want to invite people who haven't had space to participate in another way. If you've already participated, consider stepping back and making room for others to participate here. So that everybody can have a voice in the space, and making sure we have plenty of time for the commissioner and dog committee discussion.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
What exactly do you mean by participation? Are you referring to like participation, like, did you receive my email?
No, I mean, like, so if you, when I open it for public comment, and anybody is welcome to speak, and I'm just suggesting that if people have already engaged with us quite a bit, maybe an opportunity to step back and let others engage. So we're going to have public comment, and then we're going to go into a deep dive kind of discussion of the options that are kind of surfacing, coming to the surface as primary solutions going forward, and talk about the pros, the cons, tweaks we would like to see. That'll be just a discussion between commissioners, staff, and the dog committee, working through a kind of a table format together to organize our ideas and conversation. And then we'll have space for each of those three groups, the dog committee, staff, and commissioners, to discuss further. And then we'll figure out next steps in terms of what is happening in our next meeting, when we meet just about a week from now, next Monday at 5 p.m. So that's kind of the outline for the evening. We're hoping to do all of that by 7:30. And I think that's everything. I'm going to pause there. And it's 6:14 now. I'm going to open it up for public comment. And again, please limit your comments to 2 minutes and consider stepping back to make space for others if you've already spoken up.
Did you have a question?
I was just wondering, once you start meeting, are we allowed to make comments or we have to
We're-
be quiet and just listen and can't comment?
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna do in order to make space for the conversation amongst the committee and commissioners is you all are welcome to observe but we're gonna,
You can't say.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right, so this is it.
Well, for tonight, yeah. You can email us, yeah.
And that's
Next
Yeah.
Monday.
And yeah, so we have,
This is both all three parks. These are the on leash, off leash.
do you mind introducing yourself with your name?
Lane Ochala.
Thank you.
I don't have to tell it for everybody, but so why I'm doing this, I'll be making a comment. Maybe we can just pass them around. So in fairness, if you look at the map, the off leash area the on leash area, North Branch and River Park, if you're gonna start making us use leashes in Hubbard Park, then I think we should easily get, off leash areas in the other two parks. Fair, sounds fair, right? Dogs that are leashed are more dangerous. That's why the rules at the dog park, at most dog parks, are take the dog off leash before entering the park. And many of us have walked our dogs off leash for 20 to 30 years in this park. Are you gonna have the park staff police this? Do you think the park staff really wants to hand out tickets? Did John E. Hubbard, one reason he donated the land was to preserve the wilderness for the future generations. Early photos show horses grazing on grassy hills, untied. The mapped areas that you guys have, are just not good for an elderly person, and our population has gone up more for the elderly than anything else in Vermont. So.
Thanks, Elaine. Yep. Yes.
Well, I'll go next. Thank you. And I have not engaged in this process before except to watch it from a distance. And my name is Charlie Watson. I live here in Montpelier. I've been here for, I don't know, off and on 20 years. And my opinion, this is a tempest in a teapot. Much ado about nothing. It's because, and I say that because and by the way, Alec does great work and has done an immense help to the park. It's wonderful. However, this is an issue that is critical to a very small number of people, I believe. I saw 547, I think, was the number of responses. People don't respond to positive things. They respond to things that are negative. So you can count that most of those responses, that's the way surveys work. People vote against, they don't vote for. And most of those comments have come. My guess is we don't know that because that number is not available to us, but we know that a lot of people have responded, and we don't know how many of them are duplicates. We don't know any of that kind of stuff. My biggest complaint about this is the research methodology wouldn't pass my high school class. There is no research methodology here. There's tell me some opinions and I'm going to operate on those. And the only opinions I'm going to respond to are the ones that agree with the primary charge. This whole thing starts from a position of a presumed outcome. If you look at the survey, there's not a question on there that says, should we just leave this alone? Are the dogs really bothering you? There's nothing about that. Every question on the survey is, how much should we limit? Not should we limit or not, it's how much should we reduce access for people in Montpelier. I agree with this lady over here. Those of us who are age enhanced are going to find those back line. I walk on them every day. We've been in that park, my wife and I, at least once, usually twice a day for over 10 years with a couple of different unleashed dogs. And I agree that the dogs that are problematic are those that are being restrained. We go walking with 10, 20 dogs a day in different places around, the dogs are fine. It's the people who are committed, who are transmitting, projecting that tension to the dogs. So I'd be great with doing some education for those people who are overly tense about their dogs. Dogs don't hurt each other. They generally don't hurt people unless they're being somehow restrained and given the message that whoever's coming up is dangerous to them, presents them with an issue. So I would say, first off, so the research methodology is poor. I'm not saying that as a commentary. I'm 2 minutes. Okay. I'm saying that if you want to do it, if you're going to make a research-based and informed opinion, then get the information. Who's responding? How are they responding? And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anybody else in the room? Oh, thank you. Hi.
Deborah stands out.
No, but start with your name.
Okay, I'm Deborah Listman. I live in Montpelier. I've been here 23 years this time. I've lived here before. And I do not have a dog, but I want there to be dogs in the park. And I walk there a lot. And I love when dogs come up to me. I bring dog treats because I love them so much. I also want people to feel safe. I understand that there are those who are scared, and there are a few dog owners who do not have control over their dogs, and it ruins it for the majority who do. And so I would love there to be at least 2 different sections of the day that dogs can be off leash at the least, because prime dog walking time, people who own dogs have to do it. And I had a dog in the past, and she was a big dog and she needed to run. Just walking on leash was not healthy or fair. And there's nowhere else in the city where dogs can run. So it's scary to be here and to say this. I haven't been to any of these before, but I just really want to support there to be dogs in the park. I would be really sad if they weren't. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I don't have notes or prepared whatever. But I wanted to show up and, let's see, so I'll try to think of a couple of points.
Please start with your name.
Julia Gresser. So I did write an email this past week and I'll try to talk about something other than what I said, but let's see. Okay, I broke my wrist. It's the only time I've ever broken a bone. And it was the summer before last, picking my dog up at doggy daycare. And he was on a leash and 2 other people were there with their dogs on a leash. And the dogs were all excited. And I, took a step as I was greeting somebody else and I tripped over the leash. My neighbor in Hubbard Park Drive, same thing happened to her. I picked her up off the road one morning because she had her dog on a leash and somebody else came along with their dog on a leash. And the dogs crossed and down she went. So there, I wanted to start by saying how much I appreciate all the work. I mean, I'm just like blown away by all the work and all the conversation that's going into this and how thoughtful all of you are being. But I have a fear that there's this creeping, I don't think humans are very good at coexisting with other species. And it seems like it's always like, if it's any kind of inconvenience for the human, then we should we should pen the rest of the species or whatever. So I know this is a complex issue. I know we have to work out a compromise, but I am fearful as an older person in my 70s about the decision that all dogs are going to be on leashes, even in and then the trails that I love the most, like the handicap trail and the tower trail, are going to be dogs on leash because when you're older, it's hard to be looking down at the ground constantly at roots and things and ice. Some of those trails are the best trails for elderly people. And if there could be times of the day, at least. The other brilliant idea I had was my dog is a service dog and goes to nursing homes. He had to go through a training. He had to get a scarf and a badge. And I would be happy to pay to take my dog to the Humane Society and have a staff member there see about the recall that I have with my dog, how he responds to verbal commands. Is he aggressive with strangers, whatever? They know how to do all that. That's what my dog went through to become a therapy dog. And I would pay for it to have him have a bandana with a little badge on it that says that he's been vetted and he can walk in the park. So that's another possibility. Thank you.
I'm gonna shift online for a second since we've had a few folks in the room and just see, maybe somebody can help me, cause does anybody online want to chime in?
If nobody's raising their hand,
Yes.
everybody-
Yes,
All right, I hear Janice.
yes. I wanted to speak to the person who was talking about education, because that's something that came up after it's come up a lot of times in the past, that's something that would be really helpful to these problems, so-called problems. And there hasn't been anything in any of the papers and plans that I've gone through on your website about any kind of educational element. And after that 2017 vote, that was supposed to be put in place. And we put up all those cards that Brian showed you the other day. And then it was never enforced in any way. It was never taken up certainly by the Parks Commission, by anybody in the parks. And so we have now, and also at that time, there are certain legal remedy for an incident, and it was supposed to be, all of those incidents were supposed to be forwarded to the police department. Okay, so, and I guess that didn't happen either in the last, 7 years, because what the police department has provided in the last couple of days is they have 12 incidents reported to them in the last 5 years. None of them have been investigated. Maybe one was. But then I see all of this paper, all these front porch forum kind of postings, which I think there were a couple 200 pages that are on your website. And that's all anecdotal. I mean, it has to be anecdotal because it never was investigated. So it's, I'm not quite sure why the problem has gotten so big. Because nobody wants an aggressive dog, and anybody with an aggressive dog doesn't want to come to the park. They don't want to get into that. And you have, and on these surveys as well, on the last survey, you have 246 people who say they don't want any dogs around them. You've got 220 people who say, yes, they don't care. They want to be around dogs. And then you have a neutral 48 people. On the vote in 2017, there were 1,315 votes. I think this is the only way to open this up to a city vote instead of these, you've done 3 surveys in the last, 3-4 years, and they don't really jibe much. And they are weighted as the first speaker, pointed out. And I don't think that's the way to go on deciding what you're going to do, on making such a very, unusual, it is a very hurtsome kind of rule for the park. That's
Thanks,
it.
Janice. I know Molly raised her hand next, and then we are just about at 15 minutes. Just want to point that out. Molly.
Thank you. My name's Molly. My husband and I walk our dog in Hubbard almost every day. We live just outside of town, out of the Montpelier boundary by a couple houses. And we used to live in Montpelier before then. And we've been following along with this and not really providing comment just to see where things go. And at this point, it seems that there will be some sort of on-leash policy, and we can get behind that in some regard if need be. And I just was reading today on the Front Porch Forum issue 7887 that Becca Wolf emailed you all a proposal and also posted it on Front Porch Forum. And I just want to second her idea of doing even and odd days on leash, off leash. It sounds like she's got some experience in other areas that she's lived where that was successful. And I think that might be a nice compromise because that means that everybody who maybe has mobility challenges and still have a dog or, you know, wants to be on the more maintained trails have the opportunity to be in the areas that they want to be in, as opposed to just being pushed to the far end of the park. So if you hadn't reviewed that yet, I think she also emailed you all. I strongly support that that proposal. And thank you all for the work that you're doing. I know this is not easy.
Thanks, Molly. Who has their hand up?
Will I have an opportunity to speak later, or is now my time?
Now is the opportunity. So let's hear, who has their hand up?
Mary, it's not up on Zoom, it's just.
Oh, I see. Let's hear from Mary, and then we'll hear from you, and then I'd love to create space for us to chat. Mary, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know how to make that little hand in the corner.
Okay,
I
no
still
worries.
don't know how to do that. So yeah, I am for alternating days, leash and unleashed, as Becca posted on Front Porch Forum, something like that or that. And I do think that even though the survey may have been flawed, it's obvious that there are issues, and I think the comments really speak to that over the last years. And I will say too, when people say there's only been so many police reports, it's very, very hard to do that if you had an interaction, say a dog jumped on you, and then you go about finishing up your time there at the park. But during that time, you'd have to ask, what is the owner's name, all sorts of information, you know, and that's really a difficult situation, and people aren't comfortable with that. So that's a lot of times that's why there aren't reports, unless there's been a bite or something. It doesn't mean that people haven't had negative interactions. It just means that it's very hard to do, you know, that putting yourself out there to say, look, your dog shouldn't have done that, and I want your name. That's really hard. So I want to just recognize that there are big problems. They've been going on, and I think it could be totally fair just to alternate days and also do a trial on something and see how it works. And I wouldn't go for a city vote on it. I think we've had enough information from all these years that there are issues. I love dogs, but there are issues. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Nolan Carver. I live on Winter Street. Our Blakely family has been on Winter Street for over 150 years. Hubbard Park was my backyard, and so it felt like it was my family farm, honestly, or the closest thing that I could come to my own farmland. I've made a number of, you know, awesome memories in the park. I used to really sort of like the privacy of just going for a walk, just to kind of get away from everything. Over the years, I had noticed a trend that I found increasingly frustrating, scary, and alarming. It was that random people's dogs just really like to bark at me. And I'm just one of those people. They just all bark at me, all of them. That being said, I actually have some traumatic experience as well in my family. there was a horrific incident involving some hunting dogs. Some people really get dogs and other people just will never actually get it. And that's bittersweet because that park is supposed to reflect Mother Nature. And we do struggle to find this balance with Mother Nature. And when Mother Nature goes bad, it can be really bad. But that being said, however, I do respect the majority seniority here. There are enough of us elders that we really have to consider before we marginalize and essentially disrespect our elders. That is the task that we must face here. It's a moral dilemma. It's one risk versus another serious risk. And let me just say one more thing before you consider me a dog hater. I really, really like dogs. I don't own one and I don't ever intend to own one. I'm not a responsible enough person, but I'm wise enough to know such a thing in the first place. And I really am in need of the companionship and maybe even the protection. There's plenty of drug dealers up in that park nowadays. Believe it or not, I consider our local police, to be an asset in the community. But when I see a police dog in a car, that's not really necessarily an asset to me. So, the balance can be thrown off kilter depending on which perspective, you're looking through. And I just like to say, and at least to acknowledge the seniors here, I definitely see your perspective. Because if we change this park now, you're right, we will be somewhat disinheriting that Hubbard legacy that was essentially promised to us. There's nothing like running free in the woods, even if there's some danger involved. In that case, maybe I need to learn to bring a dog whistle and a walkie-talkie to call the police. I'm not sure. That's how I feel. Thank you.
All right. I am going to shift. I'm sure other people would love to speak up. I want to remind everybody that you're welcome to email us, call us, reach out to us, meet with us, go on walks in the park, whatever works for you to engage with all of us. But I do want to make space for dog committee and commissioners to talk because we don't get to do this. This is actually kind of special. Yes.
Ask a quick question.
Yes.
Is there any option that you're going to be discussing to make no change? Presuppose that there must be a change.
I think that's a great question. I think what's been identified by years of commission conversations is that there's a need for change. What's working now is keeping people out of our parks. And it's creating a space that's essentially inequitable where there are it's actually quite fascinating because what we hear via in one-on-one walks via email is far more people saying, I have a preschooler and I'm afraid to bring them to a park. Or when my grandkids come to visit, if there were dogs on leash, I would bring my grandkids in the park, but I'm not going to do that now.
What about the other two parks? Is that going to be included here?
We have a management plan for our park system as a whole, and what we're looking at and follow up to the Hubbard and North Branch management plan is looking at Hubbard Park specifically. So we have spent a year or more assessing both of those major parks. And one of the action items was to look at this specifically in Hubbard Park. So that's what we're looking at tonight.
So just for clarity, North Branch Nature Center isn't part of the city park system. I know it's here on the map.
Well, this was on the Vermont Rec.
Site. We have no
You click
control
on it,
over that.
this pops up.
Yeah, just so you know that we have no control over leashing at North Branch Nature Center. It's a private entity.
Well, it is on the site. But
Yeah, I'm just letting you know it has nothing to do with.
And so we're looking at Hubbard and we're looking at change in the park. And in some way or another, so that we can make space for more people in our community to enjoy our parks. And the question is, what does that look like? And I think that's why actually, people have criticized the dog committee survey for saying, hey, what about no action? that was kind of the baseline starting from, is what could a path forward be? And that's why it was arranged that way. So what I'm gonna do here, and actually you all, if I do a screen share, you can see up there. Okay. So what I'm gonna do,
While you do it, can I just add something about
Yeah.
the format? I really appreciate all the people who've come, like members of the public, to come and listen and acknowledge you only do get 20 minutes to talk. And I do want to just say that this is a meeting format that's sometimes called a fishbowl, where you actually all have a really important role out there, which is to really listen to this conversation that the 9, 10, 11 of us are going to have, and take some notes on it. Think about what you hear and reflect that back to us after the meeting in some way, like talk to us, send emails, whatever. So your job is not done. Like, if you want to stay here and you want to participate, it can be really powerful to just have observers in this process.
Is there more than one email that's available, or just that one?
That one Parks Commission email link goes to the entire commission, and then we forward it. Also, the dog committee sees it. So everybody here gets it. And then also on the 13th at 5 o'clock in the chambers is a second public hearing. So that will be public comment focused, followed by a decision that will hopefully be sketched out in the next hour and 15 minutes. So stay tuned, people.
Excuse me, sir. Thank you so much. I just had one final comment. I just like to say in this guy's favor, you know, if it is on the agenda to change the rules, right? And to change the park, because it has been so in such a way, as we've let the dogs run free. It's just been that way. And now it's going to change. I was just wondering, could we possibly consider making Hubbard a dog park only? Is it worth acknowledging the possibility, at least, that it could be designated as a dog park? It's just a theory, Thank you.
thanks.
In that upcoming, the next meeting, is there more than 20 minutes allowed?
Yes, yeah.
And
Next Monday.
at 5 o'clock. And hopefully right now, people have asked me like, well, what's the Parks Commission proposing? And I'm like, I don't know, because we haven't talked about it. So right now you all actually have nothing really to comment on, because we haven't been able to talk about what the actual proposal might be. So this is our chance to create what might be the actual proposal that then you would have a week to ruminate on and comment on next week, if that makes sense. So right now, you know, anything you comment on of new ideas or whatever, we can't actually discuss those ideas except for right now, right here in this space, which is why we're creating this space.
Let's get to
All right,
Go,
let's
guys.
do it.
Let's make a plan.
So, to all of you here at the table, I've been trying to make eye contact once in a while, but I'm gonna just talk to you all here. Proposals, the two top proposals that I've just kind of heard simmering to the surface are essentially what I'm calling zones, and zones with times. And I know that there are myriad other options or ways of doing that, or things you could overlay on top. But those are kind of the two things that I'm thinking would make sense for a deep dive kind of conversation into pros, cons, and tweaks and all of that to get towards something. What am I missing?
So I'm just wondering, based on some of the feedback about the even odd proposal, so we were saying zones with times, even odd is pure time.
Okay.
Actually, I had a question for some of the commenters about that. I wasn't clear if people were saying even odd times within a zone or for the entire park. So I actually don't know, do we want to back up to like an entire park structure, or do we start with?
My understanding of Becca Rolf's proposal,
Yeah.
which someone else sort of seconded,
Yeah.
was days of the week, much like we have parking on alternate sides. Right. Like this whole day that it is an even number is on leash, and this whole day that is an odd number is off leash in the whole park. That was my
Right.
understanding of her
And that
proposal.
is less confusing than parking, because you don't have to remember that midnight exists. Because no one's supposed to be in the park at midnight, right? That's already part of the management plan. Get out of the park before 9.
Wait a minute.
And I think I think on the core zone, I think just when we were talking about zones, not everyone has a map in front of them. But the core zone has been thought of in two different ways. And one is based on Alex's north-south proposal, which kind of draws a line across the middle of the map, even with his house, which would be that, you know, kind of starting past the parking area by the new shelter and the interpretive chair. The other understanding of core zone, I think is a little bit more focused on like the hot trails that everyone loves are Stone Tower Path, Interpretive Trail. And in that area, sort of above Course Street and kind of if you're looking at the map to the left of the Park Drive.
And Seven Fireplaces also.
And the
So-
Seven Fireplaces Road. And so those are the ones that have the most gentle grade. And so one of the questions about zones that we've gotten into is looking at, you know, knowing that Stone Tower Path, Interpretive, Accessible Trail, and Seven Fireplaces are the most favorite of all users, dogs or no dogs, and also knowing where existing parking is and things like those are the trails that everyone wants the most access to. So in terms of zone, we've had some comments and feedback about, you know, and the north-south of what is the zone? Is it those trails or can it include like a walk around from the outside? Like if you were coming up from Winter Street, that you could be off leash on that side, sort of behind the old shelter and like going up or, you know, is it, because the concern is if the off leash didn't start till further north, that there's not parking, it's steep trails, it's further. It gets into the average age of our park user and their what is the safest for them in terms of surface area and stuff to walk on. So I think that in terms of consensus, we all can agree that those are the popular trails. Right. And my suggestion in this conversation is, does it make sense to focus on the use of those most popular trails, like by times or in a zone plan? Like, I don't know, what do you think?
Can we, so I think we're going to have, like, once we start talking about like, oh, we could like do this on this trail or we could move this boundary. I think that's a super important nitty gritty, but I'm wondering if we could like zoom out just a little bit to just say, okay, like when we think about zones, like I don't, you know, think of the park divided in half, just think about like the idea of having zones. What are the pros and cons of that just conceptually? And then we can dive into like, you know, because I think that conversation for zones with times and times may then help us lead to like, okay, actually like of these like concepts, here's a concept that seems like it might work. Let's dive into the details. Does that work for everybody? So let's just like let's start with zones. When we think about zones, like what are the pros and cons?
So can you make it a teeny bit bigger?
Oh,
I didn't
yes.
wear my glasses. I took off my glasses. I'm like, it doesn't have to be that big, but that's great.
I think the biggest pros of the zone is the simplicity of it. That there aren't many trail crossings. It's just like yes or no. There's no like, and on the 4th, whatever, you know, 2 o'clock, or you know, it's just really straightforward. And I think that's a pro for everybody, for visitors to the park who have never been there and are just stopping by, for people who use it every day, for staff to know what's happening. I think it's just really straightforward and simple.
And that's something we did hear a lot about from people, was that they want something that's simple, easy to understand, consistent. So I think we should keep all of those things in mind with the ultimate solution we're working towards here.
I'll offer that a pro of zones is that
at least the zones generally as drawn, keep the shelters and the roads are all in the on-leash area, which sort of just solves the problem altogether of like, oh, was my dog on leash near the road? Are they like, oh, well, the road's 20 feet over there, but the dog ran into the road. Like, there's just, I've heard from a lot of people that there's tension and stress around roads and shelters and interactions with cars. And that's something I love about this is like, great, all of that is on leash. We don't have any gray areas about shelters and roads.
And that's regardless of, like, right, that's part of the park management plan.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
totally,
but, like,
but it's
all
easier to
great.
implement it. Yeah, it's easier to think, you don't have to like think about like which of these rules does it follow under? You're just like, I'm in this area.
I think just some helpful background for people in the room, there's already a city ordinance
Yeah.
that dogs must be leashed on all roads. So that includes roads within Hubbard Park. So that's where we're trying to use the roads as a natural boundary for kind of establishing these zones. You know, these roads that are within the park are all within this proposed on-leash zone currently. And that's one of the reasons.
Jesse, you were gonna say.
Well,
something.
no, I mean, I was just gonna say I think the big challenge is then, the con depends on what the zone is, but I think a potential con is, the amenities, the safety, the accessibility of whatever that zone is. So that's to me the big potential con, again, depending, you know, you could think, what if we flip the zones, but like of a current zone proposal where the core parking, outhouses, shelters, you know, flat trails are all in a potential on-leash zone, that's the big challenge.
Flipping the zones is interesting, like if north was on leash and south was.
I mean, I just think it's like that mental exercise of, oh, well, right, a zone proposal, but then it depends which the zone is, I think, like the pros and cons. So I do think, you know, I just have been really struck by the number of people commenting who do not feel comfortable on the current northern trails. So again, depending what the zone is, I think we need to make sure that there is access to trails that people feel are walkable, depending on, regardless of season, time of day, you know, that people feel comfortable walking on.
And I also think it's important that any improvements that we're planning for the new parcel are kind of like expedited as part of this, because I mean, sure, we're not going to be able to get all the signs up, all the outhouses in before we implement this change, but we can make it a bigger priority to make those things happen much quicker so that people do feel more comfortable in that new northern portion of the park.
Although I think the core of the park is desirable.
I think desirable is the high eye of the beholder. I desire to go to the northern part of the park more because of rich northern hardwood forests, the wildflowers, the solitude.
I do too. You know,
so
I think I'd say desirability, but also accessibility in terms of like we've heard from people who don't have cars and like can't get to those trails easily if they live on the Winter Street side. So I think we have to think about that, and there are many ways to think about.
Yeah, and I think accessibility is more straightforward.
Yeah,
definitely.
And it has come up in other comments about flipping and saying the south be off leash and the north be on leash, from people expressing like, what are the new trails going to be? And that area is more wild, and maybe we should like leave dogs where they are and expand on leash to the north. And zones could be flipped.
I have trouble with that idea because the shelters are for people, not for dogs. I don't think that the shelters should be in an off-leash zone.
But if the shelters already are on leash and the roads are on leash,
and you're having more confusion, more opportunity for there to be off-leash dogs coming into what's supposed to be an on-leash area, which are the shelters.
Well, let's stick with like the zone concepts generally, and then we'll get into those pieces. Dana.
I just was a process question. With this many people, I'm wondering if it'd be useful to take stack and be like, you're next, and then you're next, and you're next, because I'm seeing some like cross conversation. I just want to make sure every voice gets heard, because with 11 people, the quiet people don't always talk.
If you want to help me do that,
That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's gonna be hand raising, which is annoying, but.
Sarah.
Two things. I'm wondering if you could put that in that bottom part where you had the also.
Yeah.
To put that already it is part of the new
Management plan.
management plan. Thank you, that dogs must be on leash at where, you know, the shelters and all of the parking areas. Because I think that's informative when we're looking at possibilities. And then on the pros, could you also put safety and accessibility as well for the people who don't feel comfortable interacting with off-leash dogs? That's a pretty huge issue that I hear a lot about from elders. And I'll count myself in that group now, or people with injuries or whatever that, you know, the simplicity of knowing that there's a place they can go. And they might even love dogs on leash, but not want to interact with off-leash dogs. So knowing that there's a place that they can do that provides accessibility as well.
You can keep your cursor in the pros, because I would like to add that I think the zone option allows, you know, all users an option every day somewhere in the park. And I think that was something that we all really liked when that was proposed. I think the other thing is that this doesn't exclude anybody from any part of the park. It simply says that, you know, in certain parts, you're going to have a leash, you know, whereas right now, people who are not comfortable around unleashed dogs are excluded from the entire park. So I think that's important to keep in consideration, where we're not actually saying you can't go anywhere to anyone. We're saying, how do we get new people into the park so they can make these, you know, decades of experiences that they're going to love and have, that we've heard from a lot of people that have been comfortable going to the park. And a lot of people don't have that years of experience to reflect on because they haven't been going to the park.
Thanks.
So Jessa and.
Sorry,
You have the next one. Okay. Just a minute.
I don't know if this is necessarily a con or a challenge. I think, one concern I have, and I think it's more applicable to a zone than an hour type solution, is that you're basically constraining the same problem to just a half of the park or part of the park. Like, because there's still going to be half the park with off-leash access that then if people want, like, especially if there are new trails and the new parcel people want to visit, like the same issue of I don't want to interact or I feel uncomfortable or unsafe interacting with off-leash dogs is now still going to be the same issue. It's just part of the park rather than all the park. So what is going to make this solution something that in 5 years, we're not back with the exact same concerns, but now just with half the park?
Thanks.
I feel like I want to kind of follow up on Lincoln's comment about people having a really long experience. And I think that's one of the challenges we're facing here is that, like, clearly there is not equal access to this public park, which needs to have public access. And so we need to figure a way to create that public access. But also, I think I've been really struck by the number of older people who have commented and said, this will basically mean that I'm not going to go to the park anymore. So even though technically we're not telling anyone they can't go to the park, if that's how people visit the park, they go to the park to exercise with their dogs. And there's really no other place you can do that in Montpelier, then I think that's something to consider. And I think, yeah.
Thanks. A challenge that I would surface with the zones is, which we've heard, I think, from the Conservation Commission and a couple people emailing, is the northern ecological communities that I know we are pretty special. And especially right now, the wildflowers are primo. And so thinking about zones, thinking about how do we make sure that if there are, we don't know what would happen, but I could imagine that it would have increased use in that northern part of the park. And so if you have increased use and increased off-leash dogs, especially in that rich northern hardwood forest, what's the ecological impact to those natural communities? We can monitor that, except that monitoring just documents change, and at which point you kind of like lost what you had and it's hard to get back. So what can we do proactively? And, maybe for that, those trails that do go through that special habitat, maybe I'm not an ecologist, so I don't know the dates, but like maybe there's a time where like those trails, like yeah, it's an off-leash area, but in the month of May, you have to have your dog on leash on those trails just to protect that special habitat. I don't know what that would.
Predicting.
So I don't know what would protect the ecological communities, but I do want to bring that up as a challenge, and something that we should just be thinking about is what the impacts will be on the ecological communities.
Let us have our conversation, please.
I mean, I think there's a lot of room for education in both just how to be a respectable dog owner and for things like natural communities that we want to protect. I mean, we have signs up around the various, what are they called? The vernal pools. And maybe it's an opportunity to do some educational signage in those areas of the park, along with monitoring. And if we are seeing damage as a result of increased use, then, more education, or asking people to leash their dogs for a short period of the year over a short amount of trail.
Or could they be protecting the resource like we did with the vernal? Like,
Yeah, it's about
like,
protecting the
that's
resource.
flowers rather than,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, so I don't know what those solutions would be. I just want to bring that up because I think it's something pretty special about our parks, that we don't want this decision, just thinking about people and dogs, to accidentally say, oh, wait, we used to have those beautiful wildflowers. That's a bummer. We've talked about zones a fair amount. If we, any other like big pros or cons to bring forward, or else I would love to have the same conversation on, maybe times first and then zones with times. How's that sound? Does that trip people
Time
up?
for the entire, okay.
They're called days.
Oh, great, thanks.
Can I make one more, I think in comparison kind of con, that like having zones does increase the probability of crossing, like some dog running into the off zone when someone's visiting versus like the daytime. I mean, maybe that could just be a pro in the days, but like if it's one full day, the whole park, people can feel more confident that they're not going to run into an off-leash dog like anywhere.
Here.
Yeah. Sorry.
So is that a pro then for
Pro
the
for
days?
Yeah.
To expect.
They can feel safer, I think comparatively safer.
No dog, no on, off dog interactions.
That too, yeah.
So.
Did I just capture that?
Yeah, I think,
yeah.
If I heard Diana and then Robin. And then Andrew after that. Okay, we'll just go in this order. Were you raising your hand?
No.
Okay, Diana and then Robin and then maybe somebody else.
I want to reiterate my concern about the northern section having a lot of roots, hills. I don't feel as safe there walking alone because there's not as many people there. I understand that there's going to be a plan to make that northern section nicer. But even prioritizing it, my question is, how long would that be? How long would that take? I think that between the folks who want dogs on a leash and dogs not on a leash, that time frames every day for, say, the core during this period off leash and this period on leash, not an odd even aspect, because if it's time frames every day, and who determines what those would be. Everybody has a chance to enjoy the entire park in the way that they want to. Without dogs on leash, with dogs on leash. Every day.
Thanks, Diane.
You're welcome.
So in terms of the days proposal, the odd days, even days, and back to the zones, I will say we did get a couple of comments and feedback from people who said, I don't feel as safe walking in the northern thing because I don't encounter as many people. And I don't know if that's someone worried they'll fall and then somebody will come along for a long time. But that did come up a couple of times, that if you call for help, there's no one out there. And as far as the odd days, even days proposal, one thing that I think is a pro about that is when we got into some discussions about zones and times, like there are some people who are really morning people and they're like, just let it be off leash before 8 a.m. And like, I would never see the park before 8 a.m. and I would be bummed. And so like, I like that the odd day, even day, it gives every other day, for whatever your preferred use of the park is, whether you're a lark or an owl, you can like hit it with your dog or with your not dog or with your leash, like whatever. You can't go every other day, but you should cross train anyway, is my thought, which is not necessarily for the pros and cons, but like, in terms of, yeah, you can't, it is similarly simple to the zones in that it's concrete. You're either in an on-leash zone, you're not in an on-leash zone, you're either on an on-leash day or you're on an off-leash day. Like, I think that it's got nice simplicity too. And yeah, you can be a lark or an owl.
See, Jessa.
I think that the flip side of like the con side, I think, is that especially for frequent dog walkers, they're more of like a routine time of day and it's every day as opposed to every other, like you could potentially adjust, okay, I know I can either walk my dog in the morning or night, but you've got to do it every day sometime, as opposed to like this day, I don't have any place to go off leash. So I think it does make it hard. And I guess similarly for the people who really don't want to be around a dog, if that's the only days you're available, it's away from it gets away from the every day you have some opportunity, as your schedule changes. So I think that's a challenge of it. I also think I will admit to being one of those people who rarely knows what date it is. So like I could actually see myself without a phone or watch walking into the park and be like, wait, I actually don't know if it's an odd or even day. I just think it's a little yeah, maybe that's just my problem, but I think it is a little.
Not a problem.
It's a date when I fail every day. Like I know the day of the week, just not the date.
Just gotta know the date and draw the hands on the clock and then head to the park.
I would tack on to that for, you said the frequent users, I think also infrequent weekend visitors who might have one day that they're free and can come to Montpelier. And if it's an odd or an even day, and depending on what their comfort level is or what their desires are, they might be excluded for the weekend. So I think it's also hard for people who don't come often.
Yeah, I would really hope that we can come to a solution where a portion of the park is there whenever for whoever wants to use it. I'm not in favor of even odd days. I think we'll have more issues with compliance. I think it's harder to for people to wrap their heads around it. People have a lot of problems with the parking solution. And we even got some like joke responses on Front Porch Forum being like, what are they going to come up with next? An even odd day proposal? That's a real. So I am not in favor of even odd day.
I agree with Stephanie. I think that we're looking for some magic formula where at some point every day everybody gets to use their part of the park.
Something
Something along those lines. And, I don't know if we're gonna get there. We're for sure gonna disappoint people because either, that the time that they go to walk with a dog without a dog is not gonna be available. And for sure, we're gonna disappoint people.
I see your hand. I think another important thing, Becca's proposal, which she shared today, was very it understood that dogs need to be exercised every day. So it paired the even off day thing with adding an off leash trail in North Branch Park. So if we're not willing to consider doing that, we should consider something that would allow people to exercise their dogs in Hubbard Park.
I'm thinking, I know we have, not to even add more confusion, but the zones with times, I'm almost more in favor of it. I would be open to thinking about days if it were in a part of the park as opposed to the entire park. I still don't know that I think I still like times better than days, but I'm just saying, I think to the point of, right, we don't, otherwise the whole park is not available for off leash use for an entire day. But if it were part of the park or something like that, that might be something I'd be more willing to think about. But maybe that's just more confusing than the times with zones.
Well, that's a zones with time solution in a way that's saying the core zone is available to off leash use on odd days.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, even on in the core, as opposed to the entire park.
Have we shifted to zones with times?
Seems like it.
What about in, for half the morning, the north is on leash and the south is off leash. The other half of the morning it flips and then flip again and then flip again. So you could do a morning on leash in the south or off leash in the south. And then you could go the other way and the other way. You could circle the park the whole day.
There just needs to be magical color changing LEDs that.
No, yeah, just flip just like a slider.
Yeah.
That's gonna be your new job, is to slide.
Just keep walking by, slide the slider. Well, I guess a bit, I know that's not really a workable solution, but I think that we have this value of saying, everyone should be able to go to the park and find a place, but also everybody does want the park in different areas at different times. And I think the tricky thing on zones and times is so if we say off leash is allowed in the core zone at these particular morning hours, it eliminates everyone whose job prevents them from getting there in the morning to enjoy off leash. But a lot of people who are commenting on the public comments and stuff are retired or runners or something who love the morning or don't have a job to get to because they're retired. So they're like, morning sounds great. And for people who have to get kids and self out the door and be on meetings really early in the morning, they're never going to hit it unless it's an afternoon time. At the same time, we do have clicker data that we looked at from the beginning when we started this, and we do know that it seems like peak park usage is, we know that people use the park in the middle of the day the most. And so actually those before work hours and those after work hours, people aren't clicking into the park as much. And then we also know that the people who are clicking into the park are people who are mainly comfortable with the current status quo. So just acknowledging that and talking about zones and times, I think a lot of dog people, you have your morning out, your after work poop loop, your nighttime poop loop, or whatever it's, you have that set schedule, and it's probably more like that. But our clicker data, I think, showed the most popular times were from 11 to 3. Does that sound about right?
I think 9 to 5 is the most, but there was a couple of midday.
spikes is.
Like, I think I remember it being like, and like on our survey, it was like mid to late morning was popular. Peak like Vermont lunchtime, kind of quiet. Then in the afternoon it picked up and then it fell off again after 5.
I do want to, I mean, Diana did actually propose earlier in our dog committee group, like the flipping of the zones, not half day, but like, or not quarters of the day, but half and half. Like, could you have one on leash in the morning, off leash afternoon, and then flip, just a one flip. That does get at everybody having somewhere they can go all day in the way they like to visit the park. That's just, I know it may not be most implementable, or maybe, I don't know, is it that hard, much harder to sign than we're already signing half the park?
It meets an access goal, but not a simple goal.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think a con with the zone with times is that it's the most complex out of these 3 columns. And in the more recent past week or 2 of comments, I think I've been hearing simplicity as, the ask, even for folks that are acknowledging that they completely disagree with any change at all. They ask that it be simple. And I worry about trying to be everything to everyone with zones with times, and it has a lot of potential and a lot of risks with confusion, I'd say.
Go ahead. I'll go and then you go. How about that? I think something for zones with times that I might say as a pro is I think that there's a select chunk of early morning dog walkers, and I'm curious about these times of day where the park is less used, because I think there's less potential for negative interactions because there are simply fewer people and fewer dogs. And I wonder if we minimize the risk somewhat and make a lot of people really happy by being like, great, run with your dog between 6 and 8 in the morning, like have at. There's no one there. Like, and when we're talking about relative harms to people, like that might be a time where people who really are those morning people who get out and do that, could still do that and not put other folks at risk. So I'm curious about early mornings is the one I think of the most, I think, rather than evenings, just because of Vermont and daylight hours. But that's a potential that could give people some access to those easier trails in the early morning. You have a clarifying question, maybe? Yeah. Okay, great. I think that the thing I wanted to add as a tweak, sorry, skipping back to zones for a tweak, was I was talking to a friend of mine who had a really smart idea about saying, what if we have, say for this policy will go into effect when these conditions are met. So like zone proposal that goes into effect once we have an accessible trail in the northern section, then this will start. And so people can have some like forewarning, they can plan, they can know that when the policy launches, there's going to be these amenities. I don't know if that's feasible, but I wanted to stick it in the box. And now we're going to do Diana and then you.
I'm concerned that for the sake of simplicity, we'll lose equality between those who want dogs off leash and those who would like them on leash, just for the sake of simplicity.
So we're going to do Kasia and then we can hop back to Robin.
I was just gonna say on the morning piece, it actually reminds me of where this all started. I think Jessa, you come to mind.
I might have been there.
From our public meetings, January of a year ago, like January 2022, 3. We're talking about the management plan and bringing up the specific trails. And I remember the dog community coming out in force and saying, in particular, it's the mornings that we really have a community there. And it's the mornings that we see our friends and we see our dog friends. And it does seem like what you're saying of like, maybe there's a space to like have a very small window that's maybe 6 to 8 a.m. or 6, and I know, Robin, you're an afternoon person, so that shouldn't work for you, but we're not going to find things that work for everybody. But maybe that does actually like support that community and support that experience in the park and create space from 8 o'clock on the rest of the day to have everybody else enjoying, anybody who wants to enjoying the tower space.
Robin, would you make it? We're going to do Robin and then
I was gonna ask Robin if she'd get there.
Okay.
9.
Right, I mean, yeah. But you know, maybe they're just, maybe that's part of, like, that there are more morning people, and like, I just don't, you know, have to move to Calais and get a giant piece of land or something and walk on it by myself. But I think that the thing with the times of day and the zones, like Lincoln had brought it up at our last meeting, like talking about how in New York you have times of day on both ends where it's off leash. And I lived in New York for a very long time, and it's before 9 and it's after 9 p.m. And the parks have really big lights because it's a city park, and we're not about to put floodlights throughout Hubbard so that we can have, like, after, you know, dark walking. But, you know, I do go back to, like, the popular usage times are until about 5. And in the winter, if you can be off leash after 5, you're kind of in the dark anyway for good chunks of that, if not sooner. In the summer, like that's a really long window, and there I could see where there's might be people who want to use the park that don't want to encounter off leash dogs, but which is part of why I think there's some inherent fairness in the inconvenience of odd even, that everybody gets all or everybody gets nothing, depending on what day it is. But yeah, I think on the times, if we're going to talk about a zone and the only concession to time is before 8 a.m., I also don't think that that is a very great acknowledgement of all of the elders who use the park with dogs who aren't going to get there at 8 a.m. Or before 8 a.m. And, you know, I think it's tricky because you could get into, this is when toddlers are napping and this is when school kids are out and all of that. But right now, I think it's worth acknowledging that there's a strong group of current users who I don't think want to exclude other people from the park, but like are using that park in the day. And so if we're going to get into a zones and times, it doesn't have to be flippy floppy so many times a day, but maybe it needs to, like, is it terribly unfair to say the core is on leash from noon to 5, or somebody said I heard 10 in the back corner, but like, you know, like this started out like when we were like tasked with the discussion. Which is why as the dog committee, when we originally said like, how about on leash from 2 to 4 every day? We're like, okay, the Parks Commission originally said, hey, we're thinking like, let's just make tower and interpretive on leash and leave the rest as is. And so we were looking at it and we were saying, oh, simplicity, trail crossings, all of that. How about 2 to 4 every day, leash your dog. Morning dog people can still be walking, evening dog people can still be walking. Every day there's time that is in the after school zone that could capture kids where they could not have unleashed dogs, and that 2 to 4 in terms of hours of park operation is percentage wise greater than the 2 trails that were originally thought of. Let's just leash those trails. So this has gone far from that. But I don't know. I think like wearing much more of an advocate hat, I would suggest if we're going to talk about a zone and leashing in the zone and thinking about who's our current user, what their demographic is, and what trails they want to use, I would lobby for
a good chunk of time of on leash in the core zone, but also a good chunk of time off leash in the core zone. Which doesn't really necessarily fit into the chart that you're making, but,
Both the zones of time. Sure.
Yeah.
That's like the,
That's the amount of time.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw Jessa and then Stephanie.
And then I want to, I keep hearing zones and maybe it would make sense to like refine what even we're talking about and get into like, what's the lines? Yeah.
I'm gonna echo actually a lot, Robin got to a lot of where I was going, which is, I know this is overgeneralizing and I don't wanna, I really actually don't like the bifurcation of the dog people and the kids people, so I don't think that's fair. However, if that is some of what we have heard is like, I'm scared taking kids here versus I'm an older person and don't feel safe in the northern section, again, not mutually exclusive categories, but I do think a later morning than an 8 a.m. I would also strongly support. I think like of the most dog walkers I see, I mean, yes, there's the really early morning, like before we get to work crew, but there's also a strong component of the like, we roll out of bed at 8 and then we go up to the park in the 9 to 10 window, especially if we're talking 7 days a week on the weekend. Like, I don't think there are many people up there before, we're there by 8. I also think if it were, say, a 10 a.m. start, that allows like the most families with kids probably aren't rolling into the park well before then anyway. So I think that would give a chance to accommodate most of what we were hearing in terms of how people would like to use the park. I echo also like the end of the day after 5. Reading, well, and there are people who ask, I think that we've seen that with the data, there's not much use, whether I don't know that exact cutoff at the end of the day, but I think there's a time at the end of the day. Like if we said it, I worry if there were no cutoff at the end of the day, there are going to be people out there in the dark with their dog off leash anyway. Like in terms of enforceability, if it's like 8 o'clock at night and you're out there with a headlamp, I think it would be fair at some point at the end of the day to say, okay, if you can get out there in the dark, then go for it.
Well, first, technically the park is closed at dark, just so you know.
So
It says a lot of different. They are.
That question, I don't know when the park closes.
They're contradictory.
Yeah. So I think we've talked a lot about current park users and their access. I just wanted to highlight that one of the groups we also heard from a lot in our comments was elderly folks who do not come to the park because of stability reasons, because they did not want to get jumped up by a dog. So like, it's not just elderly people who have trouble walking their dogs on leash. It's elderly people who are not coming to the park because they do not want to get jumped on by a dog and lose their balance. It's also people with young families, people with injuries or other, instability issues with walking. I think I could be in favor of doing a time-based proposal that still maintains most of the day on leash in the core zone. I think it's really important that the park is there when people need it. And that they can use the park in a way that is safe for them. So maybe we've talked 8 a.m. I think 9 a.m. is about the latest I personally would support for establishing that cutoff. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to add at this point. I think that covers it until, we can get into the zone boundaries next, if we think that makes sense.
Andrew's hand. Oh, great. Andrew, you haven't said anything.
I'll try to finish a little wandering. Some points are made that have got me thinking while I'm sitting here. And I think that going many months ago, when we first started contemplating a new management plan for the park, we knew we were getting that new parcel, the Heaney parcel. And then I kind of remember one of our meetings where we said, should we dare to touch that third rail of dogs in the park? And we, eventually wound up with what was in the first management plan rollout, which was the 2 trails. But, way back then, a friend and a colleague in town, I was telling him we were working on this new management plan, and I said, we're we're considering, you know, whether we should have a look at the dog issue. And something Nolan said, you know, my friend said, well, we have a dog park. And I said, well, and he said, no, hear me out. We have a dog park right now. Dogs have super status up there. Everybody's more than welcome to come to the park, but you do so knowing that dogs are maybe going to be run up to you, whether you want them to or not. Dogs have super status up there. And I remember that conversation, and at first it didn't really settle in. I thought, well, he's overstating it a little bit, but I've come around to thinking that that's kind of what we have. We have a dog park right now. And so, Charlie, you asked, you know, has a decision already been made? The answer is yes. We did make a decision that we were going to do something, and that's where those 2 trails came from. The survey that we came up, yes, it was slanted. Maybe it shouldn't have been, but it was by design because and I know because I gave the directive to the park commission to the dog commission, which was the Parks Commission has made a decision. Our role here is decide where and when. I think that was probably in the first 5 minutes of our meeting. So yes, the survey did wind up reflecting that. There was no straight up yes or no question. Should we make any changes on the survey?
Was that, sorry, I know.
Yeah.
Was that ever posed to the general?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In the preamble.
No,
Yeah.
no, to the general population.
Can we talk about the survey after?
Yeah, let me just keep going.
Things to say.
And so, you know, then it comes around to another word bouncing around my head is equity. And I, you know, through years now of, you know, non-binding referendum questions on town meeting day and the surveys that we did and the mountain of email that we've been getting on this. I personally am way past the point of any reasonable doubt that this is a small population that's being overlooked. It's not a small population, in my opinion. And so, you know, the idea of equity is very important to me, that there is a population of people who we need to think about and to, as much as we can, provide an accommodation. You know, we did get people who don't want to deal with dogs in any manner whatsoever, and we're doing nothing. There's no discussion about doing anything there, and I'm not proposing that we do. I'm not. I still am okay with the idea of erring in terms of the overall size of whatever we decide, erring on the side of dogs, more for dogs off leash still than on leash. But I remain committed that we are going to do something. And it needs to be significant for times where dogs are on leash. So having said all that, I also agree that we can a good lawyer mediator would have us walking in 1 minute increments to a time of day in the core when I think we might be able to agree on. That's my speech.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Was there somebody else in line, Dana, or? Emily looks like she was
now. I wanted to, it looks like, I don't know if there's a second page in Alan.
There was a second page, but I don't think we got printed.
There's a second page.
Also possible that it was left in the set.
That's
soaking so.
okay.
To dry out. Right.
This is a compilation and I posted it.
Is it on the table over there? Was it like collated when it printed out somehow? Or is it double sided?
I got it back, but I printed it out.
Can I snag one of those?
I think there's only one more. Yeah, I think there's only one more.
Do you mind to share?
Yep.
I mean, I don't really need it as double-sided one. Anyway, they shared it to the Zoom as well, and it just compiles all the suggested solutions that we got, just to like keep those on the radar and also think about how all of the solutions that we are looking at include education, more signage, more, hopefully like the creation of a new dog committee that would help to organize things like free trainings or maintaining a new dog, creating and maintaining a new dog park, things like that. So this is like what we've been discussing is really just one part of the solution. And I feel like there might be like the best elements of some of these suggestions could help maybe reach a better compromise. But yeah.
Thanks so much. Should we look at thinking about zones, whether there's times, no time, whatever, just zones? Where are the lines? And I'm wondering, I've got the chart sharing. Should we be looking at something else on a big screen? Like a blank, like,
This one is
Yeah.
from the park
I'm gonna
commission
stop
website, I
sharing.
think, right?
Yeah, let me just update the one on the website, because the one on the website, I just added the dotted line, which was included in like the bridge article, had the one.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
that includes the dog area, so the dog park. So let me.
Do you wanna
just
drop
give me
that into the
2
chat?
seconds and I will. Oh, yeah, would that be faster?
Yeah, can you, is it a PDF? Just drag it into the chat and then we can grab it from there.
Also, just major props to Alan for all of the document wrangling and also. Yes. The comment wrangling, like that is.
Oh my God, that's saying that, right?
The reading. 75 pages, 76 pages.
Oh God, I know that Google Doc.
I could start talking about the zone lines. I do like the original zone because it excludes roads and excludes parking areas from being the line. I think the alternate line that would kind of go close to the new shelter to what we're referring to as the dog field. I'm skeptical of making the boundary these blind corners, these parking areas, these shelters. It sort of seems like kind of setting ourselves up for some boundary issues where the original line makes it so you do have to either, walk past out of roads or park and get out with your dog leash, and move to that leash zone and then unleash. I like the idea of you're going to have to start with your dog on leash and then you have to move to an area where you can then unleash. I think if the boundary was parking area an off leash place, people would just be apt to open the door, let the dog run out across the boundary and say they're good. So that's where that's my initial thoughts about these two options.
Sorry, Lincoln, I was typing up comments as you were saying what you were just saying.
I like the original park staff proposal that came forward of having that boundary be out of the parking area and kind of further up in the north side of the park. So
not including the current dog field.
So not
Alex
included.
original.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the boundary being at that, blind corner. And then also too close to the new shelter and having off-leash dogs interacting with the shelter, interacting with the road. And I feel the simplicity of that northern boundary would just eliminate the possibility of those conflicts.
See, Jessa. Are you ready? I
I'm
don't know.
ready.
I
I'm
feel
trying
there's
to
some
think of-
processing
Pause for a
happening.
sec, yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out the best way to capture notes. Like maybe there's language, if we're talking about, well, they're both pink.
There's the
what
dotted
language-
line and the solid line.
Dotted and solid. Can we use dotted for the smaller one and solid?
Yeah. Pro salad.
And you both.
Or maybe there's better, I'm looking for some terminology to help with the notes and like guiding the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we say original and alternate, is that too biased? Is that clear? That there is an original boundary proposed and then there's an alternate proposed.
Okay, so the original is solid lines.
Yeah.
And the alternate is dotted.
Another way to say it, I could just say, including the current dog field or not.
Solid. But it includes it in what? Like.
In which side?
Yeah.
I think about drawing the boundary in the dotted versus solid lines, right?
Yeah,
That-
okay,
That's
so I'm.
basically what we're talking about.
Yeah, okay,
in
I'm
this
just,
discussion.
that'll help organize, I just wanted to organize
Those
how
are
we capture.
They're
what we're
shorter
talking about.
words than original and alternate. I could type them quickly. Cool. Are you good to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, Jessa.
I will speak up strongly in favor of the dotted, because especially if we're looking at which sort of the types of trails available in the, I'll call it the northern section, there really aren't very many short, and safer or flatter loops that could be done off leash. I mean, I know, I acknowledge you can walk on them with your dog on leash and then off leash them. But that just seems to be presupposing kind of the worst intent in everybody rather than we understand, there's already the rule about parking lots. And so we don't, we don't let our dogs run out off leash. As opposed to let's give some people some realistic actual circles they can walk, to include the whole the hemlock to the 7 fireplaces or the fitness to 7 fireplaces. I think starting in the middle of trails, I think it's going to be a big compliance issue. I mean, I just don't think people are they're going to think of those trails as off leash trails, regardless of where the signs are. I actually, just personally speaking, not reflecting the comments, don't have as strong of a feeling actually about the ball field itself. Though I know we did get comments about use of the ball field itself, but to me, at least starting at that spot also, adds some safer loops. It adds parking in the winter, a little more accessible to people starting at a parking area, or a better parking area. So I am in favor of the dotted line. I will throw out, I think it is worth this group thinking about. And I'm not sure I have very many in the group with me on this, but some trail or off-leash option that starts further down at the Frog Pond parking area as well. I don't, sort of north of Parkway Street, I don't think those trails are used very frequently and are sort of the highly trafficked, family-friendly trails anyway. So I think it could be done. I know it gets into complexity again, and some people really don't want more complex, but I think that personally that I could see that being very reasonably done, like going through the ball field to get to the fitness trail. But that's my 2 cents.
I am also in favor of the dotted line. I think that solves a couple of the issues that we've been hearing about, people wanting more direct access from their vehicles, people wanting more facilities. That adds another outhouse within the off-leash area. I do have some reservations just having the off-leash area so close to the new shelter. But I think it's certainly worth a try to, give people a little bit more easily accessible options to the off-leash zone, to first start with the boundary there.
Yeah, I guess I'll just respond a little bit to that because I do, time and time again, we've heard we don't want this to be a slippery slope. And if we're doing something where it's like, well, let's try this and let's start here. And if it doesn't go well, then we'll push the boundary. I think people would have a hard time swallowing that than just starting with further up boundary where we know there's not going to be conflict. And, the idea of, potentially putting a fence up, I also am throwing in here as I can't imagine how would that also be the boundary of an off and on, where we're trying to we're concentrating dogs or saying go here, making the feeling of like a pseudo dog park, but also making that the boundary with the road. I just feel like there's just a lot that could go wrong there potentially.
I hear you. I do think we've also heard from a lot of people that, that doing something on a trial basis is okay. As long as what we're saying is, this is the zone boundary we're gonna start with, there is a chance if there are too many negative interactions within that specific areas of the park that we shift to the original boundary proposed by Alec. I think that's more of like an adaptive management process than a slippery slope, as long as we're very clear from the beginning of what that alternate boundary would look like if there are too many incidents within that area.
Yeah. I would like to know, like, I understand the concern about interactions at shelters and roads or transitions, but I do know from the survey that we did, it does go back to like the pond tower trail. People really don't use that, and the trails, not that it goes much to anywhere except for another road, and the trails around the ball field and around behind old shelter that aren't on the sledding hill, like those are very unpopular trails.
I will say there is a child play structure, right within that area. So I do think.
By where the like.
By where
and the
the
needles
ball
on the
field is.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like the best off leash zone to me because of that.
I will just add into this. I think the thing that informs my thinking about this is thinking about sort of different groups of dog users and the people who want the like long ramble versus the people who want to just come and like hop out of their car and throw a frisbee for a little while, and just like the different ways that people use the park with their dog. There's like some different ways, and thinking about having to walk all the way to Seven Fireplaces with your frisbee is not the same thing as I got out of my car and I walked 20 feet and then we can have frisbee. So I am in favor of some kind of dog park area that's enclosed for dogs who want to do that in Hubbard. And I kind of don't care where it is. Like, it could be at the current dog field. It could be in the ball field. Maybe I don't know. Like, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me because my dog hates that shit. But like other dogs think it's great. She's like, I refuse dog parks, whatever. They're not into it. But other dogs, it's like a super social and it meets a really good need for puppies and all of that. So I don't know, and I think the Parks Commission has said before that maybe this is actually a citizen thing, that like citizens got to get together and organize and raise the money and do the thing. But I guess I would encourage some support and organization around helping that happen for like that specific use. I think if that need was met, then the northern section might work better. Like just thinking about meeting that need kind of as a separate need from I want to have a 2-mile ramble with my dog. That doesn't really like help add to this particular, sorry.
Is there
but
a way to add parking closer to the Seven Fireplaces? Like add parking past Alex's house to open up more space in the northern?
But then, I mean, that's the most accessible trail currently within that zone is the Seven Fireplaces.
Right,
trail.
so that you
don't
can be
want to
parked
allow
there.
cars
right, but that
in
turns
Seven
on that trail.
Fireplaces on the trail.
No. I mean, just like park a little further in that direction past New Shelter so that people who are mobility challenged and driving into the park that need to access, if northern is the off leash.
I think the park, do we use that for the staging area for park needs right now? The area between the parking at the new shelter
Yeah,
and
that's
the
where all our equipment is.
Yeah, we could move that equipment to the dog field. Yeah, and then you can move your equipment to the dog field.
I think-
And park the parking for the older people who need to get to Seven Fireplaces and use the north end could go where the equipment is. Equipment could go in the dog field.
It looks like Kara maybe wants to speak to that. Is that good?
I
The
think
question was
that-
addressed to Alec, but
No matter where, people are gonna have to park somewhere, put their dog on a leash and get to the off-leash area, no matter what, because leashing is required in parking areas. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
That's true.
yep.
So if you park at the new shelter, you only have to walk, well, either 100 feet for solid line or perhaps 40 feet for dotted line. But regardless, you're going to have to put your dog on a leash at some point to get to the off-leash area not there.
Unless you're walking into an off-leash zone.
Right, from.
And then the parking
right.
doesn't matter, that's in the park.
Yeah.
Can I just ask the P on here, near the dotted line, is that the dog field parking?
that's
or
the
is it
new
the
shelter.
parking?
I-
The dog field parking is not.
I penciled in
Yeah.
another
Okay,
P
okay.
at that sort of
It's
the
It
little
would be kind of where that line
Right.
ends.
Where the
Yeah,
curve is. Yeah, it's at
Yeah.
the bend.
It's at the bend, that's what okay, so I mean, I do think the dotted line does solve I mean, yes. And I think we get the common sense of like, don't open your trunk so the dog jumps into the road, have your dog on leash, get onto the dog field, but like. Then there's parking right there, I think that does get that, then you don't need more parking near the new shelter, probably. Because you'd have two parking areas, except pretty accessible to off-leash areas.
See, Alec.
Yeah. I mean, the part about the zones that it's kind of giving me the most heartache is we've all heard from people that feel, like the area that's been identified as an off-leash zone is much less accessible. And so, to me, with there's dog, the off-leash dog walking, whatever it is, it's a use that we're trying to promote. It's a great thing. It's great for people. It's obviously great for dogs, and anything that we're going to promote in our park, I feel like we should promote in a way that's as accessible as possible, provide a diverse, range of opportunities. So as I've been pondering, how to make the proposal that I put forward more accessible, I think, making the dotted line is one of those ways. It's a good example of a way that we could tweak it. Like it adds 2 parking areas, like you're saying. I think we could really improve that fitness trail. I think just psychologically, like being able to park at the dog field and have access very close to trails that feel like more, stable. It feels significant. I think there's some other ways we could make things more accessible, which we can come to later in the meeting. But I feel like the dotted line feels more accessible to those who want to walk dogs off leash, who are concerned about the quality of trails.
And
Dotted line.
the other place, just to point out, like places that people access, a lot of people currently, for better or worse, are parking on Hubbard Drive and then walking into which isn't like official town parking or anything, but people park on the road and walk into the tower trails there. And in this proposal, you could walk in, take a left turn with your dog on a leash, walk 50 feet, and then be in the off-leash area. So I just want to point out that it's fairly easy access to the off-leash area from that Hubbard Drive area as well.
I do want to respond to that trail just in terms of, and I know we've talked to Alec about this. As
The short and steep.
Short and steep is short and
It's short and
steep.
steep.
Yeah.
So to me, in my mobility level, that's great. It's still because that's where I park and enter the park the most. So it works for me. I know it does not work for everyone, which I guess it is really what influences my support. Not necessarily to mess with the zone more, but the hours in the zone. Because I do feel like that's not, for me personally, that works fine. It's a great trail. I like going in that direction, but it's not, it was, and especially at certain times of year, it gets pretty icy, it gets pretty muddy.
Which I think actually, like when we talk about the new land acquisitions and establishing new trails, a piece of that proposal, which we've tabled in order to talk about dogs, we would otherwise be talking about that, is improvements to that. There's a piece of that connects with the new trail possibility, doesn't it?
With the short and steep trail?
Yeah, or is it the fitness trail on that side?
Not
No,
there.
okay.
No, not there.
Okay.
Not that close.
Okay. It's almost 8:00. Can y'all believe it?
When you said
so I'm gonna make an attempt to pull together some of the threads that we've been hearing on the fly, so you all can see how I'm doing. It seems to me that when we talk about zones, I'm hearing consolidation around the dotted line. Yes.
Is
As
there room
opposed-
for, okay, go ahead. finish.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, it's beyond myself. Is there any interest in talking about more like the ball field fitness trail area? Or no?
Like the sledding hill.
Well, behind, not, I understand the, like a trail, like sort of, because I mean, again, not my personal concern, but from where I enter the park, but we certainly heard people entering from Winter Street saying that that's a long way to go. If you want to have a quick off-leash experience, you'd have to, frankly, basically drive or get significantly into the park.
Yeah, there was a comment at the previous public meeting that was saying if there's a zone closer to Winter Street, if there's like a corridor towards the back or something, so that, or for people who can only get in, like saying if people who would otherwise just walk and be near to the frog pond and leave will now be taking their cars up if they have to do something quick. So there was a policy argument that there could be a policy rationale for allowing some of the trails, ball field behind Sledding Hill, that type of thing be off leash, part of the off leash section, because then people who come in off winter who currently walk wouldn't be encouraged to drive by the new policy if they're in a hurry and don't have like more than a half hour to walk all the way to the back.
Kara. I feel that at this point in the meeting to bring up like a pretty drastic change feels too big, but I don't know. I don't know if I know.
I think you've already spilled the beans. You might as well say it.
It's just
Yeah.
it's a pretty, it's like not any.
It's
of
not
the
an
things
idea
you
I've heard before or
mentioned.
seen in the comments, but I mean, you know.
People have commented that, yeah, some people have emailed that.
Brand new idea.
No,
I mean,
it's not
yeah.
brand new, but it's not any of the options that we.
Right.
We're
I mean,
looking at.
it was brainstorming tweaks, the
Yeah,
options.
it's a tweak, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Something we could do right now, process wise, is to just take a temperature check on the dotted versus solid line and then take a temperature check on adding the corridor, just like these are two separate things. Might be the way I would handle that.
Let's do a show of hands.
You could do show of hands, we could also do fist to 5. So 5 is, we could do like 5 is, I love the dotted line option, it's so great. And fist is, I love the solid line option, it's so great. And then you can put yourself in the middle of that spectrum of like, yes, dotted line, pretty much dotted line. I kind of don't care, solid line, really solid, like, does that make sense? Spectrum of things. So, and then you could just look around, you could just look and we can see like, what is the vibe quickly without having to like go around and talk about it. And then we can do the same thing. Does that sound good? I just like jumped in with a facilitation move. So
Do it.
What you do.
Good.
I a lot of meetings. So what do you, welcome to my life, community organizing. Okay, so 5, think about it in your head. 5 is, I love this, the dotted line option. This is, no, I want the solid line option.
Between the dotted and the solid.
Yeah, we'll do the like corridor access off leash trail question separately. You ready?
Yeah.
It's rock, paper, scissors.
So look around. Dotted line is the 5 and Diana still has some butter hands. That's cool. Okay. So that just gives you a sense. People can look.
What does a corridor look like?
It could be a trail.
Just that one trail that goes
Yeah.
behind the ball.
I think, I mean.
I think like the
Stage.
the most to the back trail.
It still would involve intersecting with the shelter though, right?
No, because there's that dip behind the shelter. You go behind the stage, you go around through the back, and it's not a trail that's written on this paper, but it's a trail that's there. The one that goes, it's not very, it's, you gotta be a little sporty to do it, because it goes like hairpin up, and then it really steep down, and then really steep up, and then it goes steep down again, and then you come out towards the dog field. But you stay like
Behind the shelter
by like a chunky amount of yards, like not all the way to the like half line of the football playing field, but like.
How many trail intersections are we dealing with in that area?
Well, you come up from if you're coming up from Winter Street, you go through that muddy, weird, icky part, then you go past where they used to have the tents. Then you cut in before the ball field, and then you go up that steep hill, then you go behind the stage. So you're not really intersecting with much.
I'm gonna
and then
amend that a little bit, because if you were to go up that way, there's, because of the maze, that's the maze area, I think that we're referring to, I mow it a lot, so I'm trying 1, 2, 4 that go west from there. Then that would include the whole ball field, would essentially be off leash now. Up, then there's 1, 2, 3 around the stage area. And the stage, a lot of people I've observed who take that trail just cut through behind the stage. So that would sort of open that whole area up. And then there's two more, like behind the old shelter near that dip.
So all intersections that would need to be signed.
Yeah, and it would also open up some pretty large areas to off leash. Be like through the ball field, it's not a trail, it's just open.
Which becomes the shelter area, you know.
The
Stage, yeah.
And the stage
And it
area.
also seems very easy for a dog, like when I've been at the shelter for birthday parties or whatever, there are regularly dogs that just kind of wander through. And I think they're using what you've described, like, you know, I hear their owners calling like dog. And I think they're supposed to be on that trail and they've just kind of wandered over to the sledding hill or whatever. And it feels like just that just would be kind of challenging with the amount, you know, people sledding, have birthday parties, like dogs wandering in and out. This kind of like helps to keeping that in the on leash space solves that conflict.
You could alternatively, you could go up Pond Tower Trail, zip across the road, go through natural area trail, leash your dog briefly and hop on steep and short or whatever it wants for steep.
Yeah, I think we're circling back to the issues that were identified in the Parks Commission original proposal, though, when we're looking at things like corridors through the on-leash area. We're talking about more opportunities for conflict, more signage. I just don't. I just have a hard time with that because, I mean, those are the points that the dog committee itself raised about our original proposal.
That feel like enough of a temperature check just verbally, or do you want to do all that?
I will rescind my proposal with a comment that I think it, to me, then it's the balance then of hours of accessibility in that space. Like if we're gonna say, okay, it's too complicated to start parsing trails, it feels like people who enter from different parts of the park and need different experiences close, so they don't need to drive, should have a reasonable amount of time available in that zone. And then maybe that to at least enough extent mitigates the sort of not having access at all without driving. That you should be able to get to that part, some part of the day.
Did we bring that up as a con when we were talking about zones? We say that it might increase traffic to like through like to the furthest away. Parking.
No, that's a good
point.
Yeah, it'll increase car traffic. Yeah.
And temperature check on another random idea.
Yeah, do it.
I'm just curious what people think about like, so that the P that, as I mentioned before, like I feel like the folks that are really losing with this proposal are people that feel like they can't walk in the area that we defined as off leash. You know, a lot of people read Willem's article over the weekend, you know, so we could run with that as an example, but he's certainly not alone. Like I think we've received commentary from people like Pat Archibald and Bob. I mean, you know, you've mentioned it yourself in person. So, like, is there a way to support those people with this activity that's so important and healthy, especially for aging population, without creating too much complication and changing the zones and doing times? Like for me, like able-bodied people can get to the north end of the park. It's really awesome there. We could certainly make improvements to it for everybody, but could we have like a way to provide somebody, like I'm just using Willem as an example, like Willem has a dog that is not going to bother anybody, as a number of other people do. He's an aging adult. He can only utilize these accessible trails. Can we like give him a golden ticket? Like, can we give him, and I don't know what the process would be to like vet those people. So anyways, that's my temperature check. I haven't, you know, it's just what do people react to that? People think it's a terrible idea. That's fine.
I mean, I think it's a great idea, except that people that have, you know, phobias of dogs or fears of dogs aren't gonna be reassured by seeing a handkerchief around a dog's neck or a golden ticket. I think they're still gonna, not come to the park. If there's a chance they're gonna interact with an off-leash dog, even if it's an extremely well-behaved off-leash dog.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's, almost hesitant to propose it because for me, I've always been on the side of clarity in this discussion. And I also think that perception is more important than reality in this case. So if people they think they're going to encounter off-leash dogs, they won't come. Whereas if it's clear and people can feel certain that they're not going to, then they would come. But I don't know. It just.
Well, that's where it seems like maybe the zone with some kind of window of time could be that golden ticket, essentially, like where like, okay, till 8, till 9, like, I don't know what the time is, but that you can maintain that experience and that space. And granted, then like the person who doesn't want to encounter dogs and wants a morning walk doesn't feel like they could go to the core area in the morning. But my guess is if they went to the northern part in the morning when the core is open to off leash, they'll encounter way fewer dogs because everybody's getting their off leash time in that core at that time. I don't know.
And for every person like Willem, there's another person like him who feels they can't come to the park.
Right.
Because
Yeah, we can't.
and it's
go
sad to
the
think about
individual,
this person losing this access, but it's countered by there's
What's
somebody
gaining.
else who's
Yeah.
gonna be gaining access. Yeah.
And that's where like the time maybe like creates that space. I don't know. I don't know.
So you're saying that would be that the times when the core zone is off leash, the northern zone would be on
No,
leash?
no.
Quieter.
It would
Not
just
be
be
as-
quieter.
Yeah, right.
Because I would think if I wanted to have a dog off leash and I knew that the core was just open off leash until 8 or 9 or something, that's where I would go at that time.
Totally.
Get
Yeah.
that in. And then in the evening, I know like, okay, I've got to go to the northern end. So that it would make the morning, it would relieve the pressure of
On the northern
north.
part.
Yeah.
Except it's still technically off leash, so I wonder if people who are worried about dogs would still.
Yeah, I don't know if it would accommodate that, but then they'd have at least the core from, 8 for the rest of the day or 9 to the rest of the day or something.
I saw Kara and Jessa, and then I just want to do a time check on this meeting.
Thanks, Dana.
I had a thought. I think it got resolved about the golden ticket. It sounded like happened. And I'm also wondering, if the time and the zones is, there's still gonna need to be a lot of signage. And I'm like, just wondering, the visuals on that and the simplicity factor. Just putting that out there, like that, like at first, I could picture the about to enter zones that Alec has mentioned, and now you're entering it, I think you mentioned like a 50-foot buffer or something, or 30-foot, like to let people know if they need to put their dogs on a leash or that they're about to be able to let them off. And I'm thinking of like all the places that we're gonna need that up to 9 a.m. sign, and if like it's gonna make sense. That's all.
I think that, can I let Jessica go? And then Andrew? Great, you're keeping better track than
I was on the sort of, and I know a lot of people sort of threw out the suggestions of kind of training, proof of training or good behavior. I do think that's a tricky one. I think it's tricky. What would the requirements be? Who can afford the training? Who if you're visiting just for the day, how do you get it? Like I love the concept, and I think, it's great to offer, incentives for good behavior and training, but I think any kind of like seal of approval is going to be pretty tricky. I just think that would be pretty complicated. I would say on the time signage, and maybe I'm thinking of this too simplistically, it would, in my mind, if there are hours, that would go on the same signs as the zones. Like wherever you sign, this is an on-leash zone, it would just be on leash after X time. So maybe I'm missing a piece of that, but I feel like everywhere there would be a sign for the zone, it would just add a time component to the same sign. Maybe
I think, can we do Andrew and then Diana, and then if you can hold on to it? Yeah, okay.
First of all, it's 8, but I'm more than willing to stay I don't know how others feel, but.
This is a Parks Commission meeting, we go
Okay.
late.
Okay. All right.
You know, Zach.
So, just in the interest of something to chew on, I'm gonna throw out an idea, and I'm not saying I'm for this 100%, but northern part, off leash all the time. Core with dotted line, off leash until noon.
I like it.
Can we take a temperature check?
Temperature check.
It's a Zoom check.
Well,
Zero-
let's discuss,
It's
we should
just-
discuss.
It's just something on the table.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options.
there are a lot of times out there.
We're starting to get into like a lot of nitty gritty idea time, which I think could go kind of indefinitely. I'm just gonna name that like we are now with a big picture into small. And I wanna honor Diana and then Stephanie, and then we can figure out.
I was gonna say the same thing as Jess said. I mean, we have to define what the core is anyway. That sign has to be there defining that boundary. We just got times to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we haven't exactly talked about how this rollout would look in terms of signage, which seems like too big of a can of worms to open right now, but kind of the way I envisioned it would be at all the park entrances, there's a map that shows the two zones, and then when you actually are crossing over a zone, there's a sign that says unleash here or leash here. Keep it as simple as possible. And I could see adding to that, unleash here after 9 a.m. or before 9 a.m., whichever. But but in thinking of the signs that way, I could get behind a single block of time in the morning. But not like, unleash before 9, unleash again after 5. I just think that gets a little too complicated sign wise. So I think whatever it is just for one part of the day as we talk about times.
I will say this sign could say on leash 9 to 5, which is not, like, instead of saying before, you could just say 9 to 5, like it's less characters.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we could solve the sign piece. I think we should, personally, I think we should focus on what we think is the right policy and then we can make the signs work.
So it does not take 11 people to write a sign.
Please, dear God. So just I'm feeling like some room consolidation around zones in some way, and within zones, the dotted line is kind of what the fingers told us, right?
Mhm.
And so then the question is, within the zones dotted line, is there also a time overlay? So if it is 8 o'clock, it's after 8 o'clock. So do we want to talk about the variation of times and see, like, is it 8, is it 9, is it noon? Like, see if we can find a time that seems like it works. And then maybe we leave this saying it's zones or zone with this time and marinate and sit on that for another week. Does that seem like?
Can we
good for
just
people?
figure out how much longer people are willing to stay? And it sounds like what I'm hearing from you, Kasia, is like, can we leave this meeting with a really clear proposal all nailed down is what I'm hearing that you want to come out of this.
Well, and I feel like that's fair to the public, because otherwise we leave the meeting and we say like, oh, there are like umpteen different options. I think people should have the chance to say, you know what, like, zones are great, zones are not, like, know what we're thinking. So I think that seems fair to me.
Can I add, so I still have not a concern. If we can get close to like, this is what the park commission might be putting on the table for the next Monday.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that would be preferable to kind of leaving open 2 options. Like, it sounds
Okay.
like zone versus zone with time. I feel like it's most fair to the public to say like, this is what we're gonna be voting on next Monday.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to talk about zones with times, or are we not really interested in times and we just want to talk about zones? Because we could skip the time if that's.
Let's do zones with time.
Zones with times. Let's talk about zones with
Talk
times.
about it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about times that I've been trying to capture. Some I've heard no later than 8. I've heard until noon. I've heard 9 tossed around. And then I've heard this like 9 to 5. Those are kind of the things that I've
I actually said 10.
8, 9, 10.
Throw an 11.
So with all those options, let's focus on that. Like, what would a time be? And we're talking about the core.
Can I ask, are we going in the direction of saying it's only morning for off leash in the core and not evening or not bookends of the day?
I think that's open.
Yeah.
That's what this is like, what are the times? If there's an overlay of times, what does that look like?
I will just put out for whatever the morning start time is. I think it has to be reasonable to the not just super early birds, including people who don't, work really early in the morning. I don't think there's a lot of park use or like need for like, I think it should be a fair start time. I don't think it should be set like 7 or 8 a.m. I just think yes, there are the few people who are out there at 7 a.m., but that is not the majority, I think, of sort of folks who are giving a morning walk to their dog.
I think something like 11 to 4 on leash in the core.
Sorry, I'm having to send a personal text message, so I'm not doing stack for like 2 minutes and then I will, but like it's the anarchy till then, or someone else can be in charge.
Which would imply 11 to 4 off leash in the northern section.
Are you talking about flipping
Oh,
the time?
And then you're.
Or-
And then like this.
Flipping the zones?
Are you saying
Again,
it'd be on leash before 11 in the northern section?
Yes. So that on leash or people that want dogs on leash have an opportunity during that time frame to have
someplace to go.
exactly. So and then what does that imply?
Two-sided zones.
Two-sided signs.
A lot of words.
That implies early morning until 11, off leash in the core, and 4 o'clock on, off leash in the core. And then on leash during those times up to 11 after 4 in the northern section.
I like that provides space for everybody at all times, but that seems really to lose the simplicity, which we've heard. I mean, and the dog committee said, whatever, we need something simple. We keep hearing that from the public. That seems like it might, I like that it's like room for everybody, but it sounds like it's edging towards complicated. With my fear.
It also strikes me that the kind of steeper trails in the north section are the kind of trails that are in North Branch. People like walking in that kind of environment with on-leash dogs, they can go there.
So thinking about times, I heard, Jesse, you said not 7 or 8 a.m. That's too early. I heard some heads nod. So then 9 a.m.
I guess it depends on, are we talking about a bookend? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I actually like Andrew's like split the day, and I think that was where Emily started a couple weeks ago. Like, can we just do half the day?
Okay, I'm gonna go back to taking comments. No,
No,
it's great.
You're sorry.
I just wanted to make sure Kara got a chance. So Kara, and then I saw Lincoln,
Yep.
and then I saw Emily. No, did not see Emily. Great. You're all helping me. This is good. Okay, Kara.
So if I'm doing the math right, if we're doing half the day off leash in the southern zone, basically 3/4 of everything would be off leash. There'd be a half day on leash in a little less than half of the park.
Yeah.
And I don't know, from an equity standpoint, that doesn't seem anything close to what we were trying to accomplish, if I'm seeing that right.
I agree. I don't think the half day goes far enough. I think the northern section of the park should be off leash all the time. And that should be there for people who can access it. And then, a way to get there for people who want, or, a mellower trail, as we've been talking about. And then in terms of a time overlay, if we're going in this direction, and, I think it does make sense. I think the most complex of the issue of the solutions we've been talking about, but I do think it has the potential to please the most people. I think having an opportunity in the morning, and personally, I'm going to that 9 a.m. That's sort of where, in my mind, the majority of the day is dedicated to people who want to use the park and not experience dogs off leash, feel some ownership over that core area. And there's this whole other set of the park that's off leash all the time. And there's even time in the morning up till 9 a.m. that's going to be off leash everywhere. And if I don't want to see dogs off leash, I can't go to the park, at all during that time. So for excluding people, for an entire, the entire park for some hours, let's keep it short and then let's open it back up and make it accessible and really get at these people who aren't going to the park so that when they see this proposal, they say, this is for me. This isn't a performative. This isn't, a 3/4 thing. This is like, we get a chunk of the park and I know when it is, I know where it is, and I can get to it. And I'm going to come now. And I wasn't before.
Can you say it again, what you're proposing?
Yeah, I'm proposing the time overlay and, so in the morning, it would be off leash everywhere in the park until 9 a.m. And then we'd move to on leash in the core with the dotted line.
I feel like that could potentially work, but given the response we've gotten, I still kind of feel like given the context that like people only have Howard Park for off-leash dog walking, and anybody who doesn't want to interact with dogs can go to like any other park in Montpelier. That might be a hard sell. It feels like because there's so much other park land available for that kind of use that slightly less than.
But the north is available at all times.
Yes.
We're, we got one Howard Park.
Okay, I'm gonna say Stephanie and then Kara.
People keep bringing up North Branch as part of this conversation, so I'm just gonna put it out there. I think pedestrians are a little bit edged out at North Branch because of the mountain bike situation there. And I don't think it provides the same experience as Hubbard Park does to walkers, with or without dogs. So to say that people can just go to North Branch, I don't think that really is the reality of the situation for many people. I certainly do not feel safe taking a toddler to North Branch with those bikes whizzing around. So I am in favor of what Lincoln proposed. I think 9 a.m. Is very reasonable for the core zone.
I'm gonna do Kara and then Andrew.
I was basically gonna echo what you said, and also, I don't know if it's gonna open a can of worms, but I do see a lot of people walking their dogs up at the Elks Club. Country Club Road.
Elks Club. Yeah, but they're.
That won't let you.
I know it's a can of worms.
It's Andrew.
Stephanie, I was thinking, another way to test that theory is let's make North Branch off leash all the time.
Make North Branch off.
Sure, off leash all the time.
How do you
Swap
think
parks is what I'm saying.
Bikers are gonna feel about that.
They've said they don't.
And make-
It's not a.
And
It's not-
make Hubbard on leash all the time.
North Branch River Park is a city park. North Branch Nature Center is a different
Right.
entity.
Up till the
You know.
bridge, I think.
Can we do Jessa
Yeah.
and Lincoln? Then Emily? Woohoo!
So again, I honestly don't have like feel like I have the answer of when after 9 a.m., but I do think the most of respondents we heard with concern about this zone proposal are older folks who are concerned about the mobility in those northern trails. And I don't think 9 a.m. Before 9 a.m. is when at least the folks I know who fall in that demographic are walking their dogs. I think a 10 or 11 a.m. I think would people might not be happy. I know there are people who really want the noon, but I would say at least 10 a.m. to give people like a chance to wake up and do a morning walk who are not, again, the young hop out of bed folks in that space. Those are just the ones we heard, I think, over and over in the comments who would be really feel like they don't have a place they can go to safely walk in the northern section. So I would push for, again, at least a 10 a.m. minimum.
Yeah, real quickly, I just want to go back to sort of like the idea of, or the need that Montpelier has for an actual dog park. And I think Dana said it nicely. I agree with you up until the in Hubbard Park. I think there's other places where this could be done. I think it should be a community campaign with the city of Montpelier. I think the Parks Commission is here to assist, and I don't want to see all the momentum and participation that's gone into this effort just drop off. I'd love to see that go into, okay, let's actually find a space with parking that's flat, that people can have that experience of park, let your dog out, let it run or run around. We're talking about doing the off-leash walking that Hubbard has to offer, but I just don't want to mix those too much. And I'm, you know, adding in the idea of, okay, if we're going to do with this dotted line, let's do away with the fence idea, because I think that gets at trying to be everything to everyone and saying, hey, we have this false sense of security here. We're saying, bring, you know, your dogs, there's a fence here, but we're also saying that it's a boundary between a not fenced area. It's an intersection with the road, it's a parking area. I think we should drop the fence, and I think we should find a place outside of the park to do a 4 fence, you know, in a real dog park, and have the people who are going to use it help raise the money to maintain it, because it's a huge ask for maintenance. It's not something the park staff should have to be responsible for. And Hubbard Park, I don't think the terrain is suitable, and I think we have suitable areas outside of the park. So I just wanted to put that on the record, and I know it's a little bit of side rail.
Can we do, did you have a thing, Emily?
I did. So it was relating to, I just wanted to say that, like, yes, like, people could go to North Branch for like similar trails, and I agree completely with you. So I mean, it's not the same walking experience there. We also have like all of our other little parks. We have the bike trail along the river. Those are they're all on leash areas. So.
And
then Robin, and then.
I would just like to say, like, it's come up a lot in comments on Front Porch Forum and that type of thing, that there should just be a dog park, but it is a very different thing to have a dog park than it is to have a park where you can walk off leash with your dogs. Yes. And the thing that I see as a public policy good for Montpelier in having off leash walking space is that we Vermont taxpayers have to pay for the health of our elderly. And the more that their mental health and physical health, if the dog walkers is getting out in the park, fantastic. And I get it that we need to offer some physical mental health activities for non-dog older people to also get to the park. But to park a bunch of people into a fenced little yard and watch as their dogs stare at each other and then have a poop problem that's concentrated, sure, but like has a different level of maintenance, it's not the same. Like Hubbard is the backyard of Montpelier, but it's also like the woods. It can make us all feel like we actually live in Calais and can be like running around and seeing deer and all of those things. So I just think like dog park is not the same, and like compensating for off leash time by saying you could go over here in a fence is not the same either. Yeah, but I support what Jess is saying of that the morning time, I think it would, like if it could push back further into the morning so that people who are like not out the door for an 8 or 9 a.m. work start, like who are slower have a chance. Because I also don't know of, like it would be like we've talked about implementing plans and what it would look like if we did a pilot or test things. And I know that I'm really curious to see, like, once we change it and say this is on leash only, like, do the clickers change? Is there like a mass influx of people into the park? Like, are there really going to be a bunch of people who come into the park, and is it really going to change it? And are there not going to be a bunch of new people coming into the park because they can't get there between 9 and 10? Our clickers are already not showing great volume at that time anyway. So on the times and on like the whole, there's like different ways to look at the equity, but yeah, I don't think it would hurt to push a little later into the morning.
I'm just wondering what the peak like times were in the survey and with the clicker data. I thought 9 to 10 was one of the peaks.
Very consistently across 9 to 5, like there was some fluctuation, but it was like very, very similar in the 9 to 5 of people who took the survey. The clickers is different. We could go back and look at some dog committee notes.
Yeah, I don't have that with me, so I'm sorry.
But the survey only started at not, right? Like it also was
Yeah.
influenced by how we divide.
It was in
Seven,
time.
That was right.
nine to 11.
The
Yes.
question that was most broken based on like the
Yeah.
survey
Time question was
the
broken.
technology,
Technology.
the app, like, didn't allow people to.
And you couldn't pick, right,
So
right.
that one is the one to be most taken
can't,
with a grain of salt. Alec, did you have a thing to respond?
Yeah, this isn't my comment, but I just want to state for the record, like about the dog park, because I'm not sure it's ever been like definitively stated for the public. I think we've had separate conversations about it, but like we have a long-standing policy that we would support a dog park. The city would support a dog park, but like somebody was saying, you know, it's on the responsibility of dog owners to create said dog park. And in my 10 years here, there've been at least 2 efforts to do that. Dog groups, dog owners have gotten together, try to find a place, raise the money. That's how most towns do it. Like that's how Waterbury does it. That's how Hartford does it. I have the bylaws for that. Like I contacted those other towns to find out like their bylaws. We've gotten like pretty far down the road, but never crossed the finish line for a dog park. And I don't know why, you know, but it's possible that people are just like, there's not sufficient momentum because Hubbard Park is basically a dog park already. And, you know, I agree with everything that Robin said about, you know, it's not apples to apples. Like it's a different thing. And I think we should just table the answer. So, but I just want to state for the record that like those conversations have been had. And there's people who are like, what about a dog park? It's like that about a dog park. Like that is what has happened and could happen again. There's nothing standing in the way of creating a dog park other than a group of people. So what I wanted to say in my comment was, I agree with what you were saying, Jessa. Like for me, the goal is to create more accessibility, all the health benefits of people walking dogs off leash. And I don't think we're going to achieve it with a 9 a.m. Like what I observed, this, you know, is I think just based on our knowledge of the park, I'm agreeing with you that we probably wouldn't hit, you know, those people unless, you know, they're willing or able to change their behavior. I'm not in favor of any hours thing. I'd rather see like more efforts made to create more accessible trails in the off-leash zone. Than because I think, you know, you keep edging the hours more and more and more. And it just, you know, creates kind of an inequitable balance of who is this park for. But that I feel like that population is one that I am focused on, and I don't have the solution. But the hours one doesn't seem like one that I would stand behind.
Is it about hours? I feel like
Yes.
Great. It's like just to make sure that now we're just talking about hours.
11 to 4 on leash in the core. My concern about having the northern section always off leash is, first of all, the Conservation Committee had concerns about that, and so do I. And also, when trails are added, a parking lot is added, people who don't want to interact with off-leash dogs in the northern section are going to want to use those enhanced opportunities there. And so therefore they would want on-leash dogs in order to do that. So 11 to 4 on leash in the core, 11 to 4 off leash in the northern section. And then everything else is flipped.
Stephanie, did you have something?
I mean, I'm just really in favor of consistency and simplicity. I think I just struggle with the implementability about that. I mean, we heard from so many people in the survey comments and in emails that it needs to be simple. It shouldn't involve flip-flopping. We even heard it shouldn't involve any times. So that's not a proposal I would vote for.
I'll just put myself in here. Something I've been thinking about is like, would you, what is the right way to put this? Like, if I want to walk my dog off leash and I'm like, sweet, on leash hours from 11 to 4, that sounds great. Like, I don't go at that time. Like, would I be okay if it was flipped the other way? At like, as a gauge of equity, like, would I feel good about only having 11 to 4 as access to the park. Like, what if that was me? What if that was me who only had access during that time? So like, I guess my step back is like, think about being the person who can only access at this time we're proposing, and then think about being the person who can only access at this time, and like, how does it feel from both sides? Which is the gauge that I'm trying to use. And like, so that doesn't feel good to me, 11 to 4. If I'm like, that's the only time I can go, like, great, this is like bathrooms as they colored on them, like, cool. You know, I have a place to pee. It's not as great, like, so that's the thing where I just, as a dog owner, I feel like I'm constantly in this conversation having to weigh like what is good for me and my dog against like what is good for the whole city of Montpelier. And I just like have to like keep bringing myself back to that. So I'm saying it out loud. So hopefully everyone, maybe you all are doing that already because you're magic, but like.
Ties in nicely to the Parks Commission mission, our mission, you know?
Yeah. So it's just, it's really hard because we're all individual people with all of our own needs and our own experiences and all that. But I'm trying to do it like, put myself in the shoes of the elderly person with the dog, put myself in the shoes of the elderly person without the dog, put myself in, et cetera, et cetera.
So then what would you recommend?
I don't know yet, but it is less, I'm bouncing back and forth between 9 a.m. and earlier or no times. I don't know. I'm still listening. I'm still listening.
On leash for weekends.
What about off leash on weekends?
Well, I mean, most dog walkers don't go on the weekends because there's so many people. I
is
don't
the
go for the
busiest time.
weekends. Most of us don't go on the weekends. Makes sense.
They're
It's
actually-
easy. Throw it out. It's done. You guys don't have to meet again.
I mean, the dog committee did talk about
Simple signage.
a weekday,
Everything.
weekend difference, because we think the most time, like the current non-visitors, probably most would want to go on the weekend. So we,
Well, I
but
don't
we did,
think
but
about
again, in
that.
terms of the signage and.
Think how simple.
I don't know that we can make that assumption because I think there are people who are like, I go walk in the middle of the day. I work from home. I go walk in the middle of the day. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 3. But it's usually during my work day. When I had a dog, I would bring my dog. She's passed away. I'm there by myself now, but I would assume that there are plenty of people also working during the day who would like to walk during the day, during the week. And they don't go there during the week. They don't incorporate it into their work day. And so I don't think we can assume that the people not going now really want access just on the weekends.
We tried to ask that with the survey. That's the part that didn't work.
Yeah.
We were actually really curious about the weekday,
weekdays.
weekend split.
How much and how quickly could we build an accessible trail in the north? And how much would it be and how fast could it get done?
So when we say accessible, do we mean like built to like the universal
Like
accessible
Willem and
standard?
Key can go walk in an accessible trail in the north end that goes further than that little bit of 7 fireplaces.
Yeah, so an accessible trail like we built in, where it is, it's quite expensive, it's basically like building a road.
How much?
It costs like over $100,000 to build that trail. It's not money that's in any budget or any grant or, we'd be starting from zero. So to create that level of trail, and it's designed to very specific standards, like less than 5% slope, all this stuff, we don't have to go to standards, but big picture point is like, it's expensive. And we had, specific reasons for building it there. So, to create a trail that is, smooth, free of rocks and roots, that's like a natural surface, that's not a gravel surface, like we could do that this summer. But I want to be crystal clear that we cannot create a universally accessible trail such as the one that we made. I mean, we would be lucky to do it next summer if we were like full court press. This is the most important thing for us to do. I think we'd be years out of creating. I mean, to create that trail, the city got a citywide ADA assessment. So we identified that as a need. There was multiple rounds of grant funding. And then you're waiting for agreements and Parks Commission approval, and then there were public meetings, and then the contractor wasn't available, so we did it the following year. And then, it's still not done, like supposed to go to the tower, so
it's
we've
really
probably been working
special.
on it for 6 or 7 years.
It's still really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's in the south, in the quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kara has her hand up.
So the other trail that you mentioned that could get created this summer, like what could you compare that to another trail in the park, just so people would have an idea of how?
Oh, I'm just saying like the fitness trail, like we could improve fitness trails.
But the new,
And then
the
the
new trail though,
results,
and then.
how would it feel once it was done?
So you know, basically exactly how it's described in the management plan, just like a boulevard type of trail. Wide. Free of roots and rocks and general obstacles.
And are you talking about upgrading the fitness trail, or you're talking about adding a new trail to the new expansion?
No, I'm not talking about adding, I'm
Okay.
talking about upgrading the fitness trail, yeah. No, we don't have any new trails planned for, you know, that level of build for the.
So the ones, can you tell us a little bit about the ones planned for the new expansion and like the general grade and?
Oh, yeah, sure, oh, those ones, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are kind of just gonna be a similar look and feel to it's a good trail.
Like stream side, cliff side?
No, you know, the problem with those, the problem with every trail in Hubbard Park is that it was created by user activity. It wasn't created by a thoughtful trail designer. So the universally accessible trail is the first one that we have in all of Hubbard Park that's like designed and built by a trail designer. Every other trail is just like people are like, I want to go this way. And that's why all the trails are muddy. They don't carry water well. They often go on the fall lines. So I think that the trails that we build in the new shelter, in the new area will be, at least, you know, if it's left up to me, will be much higher quality than a lot of the other trails in Hubbard Park, because they'll have, you know, they'll be built and designed properly.
But a similar width to like a lot of the trails that we have now.
I would say like a similar width to like Cliffside Trail or something like that. Maybe not like to the extent of the fitness trail, but you know, 3 to 5 foot trail tread with a much wider corridor. Tread is the part you walk on, and then the corridor is the part like if you held your arms out.
But you're not whacking trees.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of that new parcel, the southern end of the new parcel, is that it has a natural, much lower grade. And so it allows for access into 7 fireplaces at a much more gradual route than like the cliff sides. It's not a hill, it's a very gradual valley.
So yeah,
The topography allows for ease.
And what about like I think like people are talking about the northern trails as like more rugged, and I think if you just looked at the trails, like if you take out the roads that people drive on, take out the accessible trail, like if you just look at the trails, I would say that the northern part is equal or better to the southern part. Like think about the trails on the southern part, like Power Trail, like terrible. You know, the trail through the meadow, they could be clayey, muddy. Short and steep trail, we've talked about issues like our trails have issues, like that's a well-known problem that we face as a maintenance, you know, it's a maintenance problem. And I would say the trails in the northern part have similar issues. But what I see and what I perceive is like people are used to walking on the roads, they're used to walking, you know, if there's just this perception that the south is so much more accessible. And then we built the accessible trail, you know, like unfortunately at the time that we built it, like we didn't define like who this is for. But at this point, it's like really valued by older adults who like to walk their dogs off leash. And so now we're grappling with that, people feeling that's being taken. So, you know, but I feel like the actual trails, like the natural surface trails, are pretty comparable throughout the park in the sense that they're like not that great. Spoken by the parks director.
Pass.
A pass.
You pass, okay. Kasia, where are we? In this?
It's 8:42. I've been in bed by 8 o'clock every day for the last week. Yeah, so I'm feeling like we have the dotted line space we talked about, consolidating there. I'm feeling I hear when I'm hearing people talk about times, I'm hearing more consolidation around like a 9 a.m., which I know is not what you all were talking about, but it feels like that is surfacing more. I don't know if we want to do like a finger check on a couple of times. What do you think?
You could pick one. Let's speak about it, or
Or could we do it for a couple different times?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8, 9, 10, 11.
11.
Right, just started.
This might be, it's just a very quick go around where you say your preferred time. And you don't add a like 2 minutes of talking about it, you just say your preferred time and get them all.
Write it on a piece of paper.
Okay, I'm ready.
Third time when on leash starts.
Yes.
Core zone.
No times, yeah. Times for, potential times for off leash in the core.
Wait,
Uh,
no, starting on leash, right? Starting
No,
on?
because one of the options could be no off leash in the core at all. It's always on leash. Which I heard some people say like, nope, we don't have any times, it's just zones. Or you can say, I want this time for off leash, I want that time for off leash.
Is that better than first deciding whether we should do times?
I think this is just a like, let's find out where the room is at because people are saying some different things.
and you could
like-
say no times.
You can say no times. You can say, my
Just-
dream is like, you know. Maybe say, I don't want to make it complicated. There's a difference between what is your dream and what you can live with, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we actually want is what we can all live with.
And it's not us personally, it's like what's best for the community. To your
Totally.
point of like,
Totally.
well, this is not what I need. This is what seems to make sense for this conversation.
Yeah. So maybe,
Speaking of seniors.
is it possible to do a go around and say what you could live with? I don't know. But I don't know where the middle, I don't know totally where the middle is. It feels like the middle is somewhere between no times at all and like a bigger chunk of, yeah.
Let's do it.
No, it's not very clear.
Starting.
Go ahead and say
Yeah.
your preferred off leash.
Yeah, maybe your preferred and then what you could live with.
Including none.
Oh,
think so.
okay. And.
Oh, okay. So we do get
Oh.
2 minutes of conversation.
I just want to see if like 7
Preferred
people all
live with.
say before 9 AM and then we can find out if the rest of the people can live with that. Like
Right.
that's what this is trying to do is like, what is actually everybody feeling and are we closer than we think?
Let's say preferred then, and then afterwards, you can say, would you?
That's great. Let's split it into two.
And I would love to say not what you could you live with.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, maybe more like what
tolerate
upholds the park's mission.
Yeah,
Or, you know, what. is,
Yes,
you know.
what is within, yeah. Let's start with preferred and then we'll do.
If
If anyone knows, they can start.
I know.
Oh, we're done.
No times.
No times.
And then we'll go this way. Sorry, Stephanie, you're in that seat.
I'm with Alec, no times.
11.
11.
No times.
No times.
I think 9 AM.
11.
No times. This is preferred, right?
Preferred.
Yeah, preferred.
No times.
Either 9 or no times.
So of the commissioners who actually get to vote, we have a no,
11.
I
11.
don't get to vote.
He doesn't
and-
vote.
No, I know, I was pointing to Stephanie.
Oh.
No.
So no,
11.
11, no, no,
That was on.
9.
Let's do what we can live with.
Yeah.
Okay, now do.
Yeah, let's do it. Like,
So having heard that, you we know the parameters, like.
Now what we can live with, what would best uphold our mission and all I'll read the mission. Now would be an appropriate. Right hour of 8:46 PM. The mission of the Parks Commission is that the Parks Commission advances a long-term vision to ensure that parks, gardens, greenways, and natural areas are vital to Montpelier's community identity and forever available for the enjoyment of all.
Can I just say, if you have no time, does that imply always on leash?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted
Correct.
clarification.
Yeah. Always off leash.
Stephanie, go.
I can live with 9. And
9.
Wait, we're not talking about what we could live with.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are.
We're just not calling it that.
We're not using that for anything.
I just feel like, sorry, that just seems confusing because you just read the mission and it said, and I think the question is actually like, what best upholds the mission?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not like what could we live with? I think that's
Right, 2%.
actually a different answer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's restart,
Okay,
let's
okay.
restart.
What
What best upholds the
mission?
mission? No pressure.
I'm still sticking with.
Wait, sticking with 9?
Yes.
Okay.
Me too.
10.
More confused. Eight.
No time.
I also think no times.
11.
10.
Did you say
10.
10 or you were repeating?
I
Okay,
said 10.
no times.
I'm also no times.
I hope you were putting that into a really cool table for us.
I've got a bulleted list.
Okay.
With commissioners in bold.
You know, I said preferred, no, because I would love to snap my fingers and have a trail system in the northern.
Yeah.
That was equal in everybody's perception in mind or whatever.
I think this talking about times, there's a lot more to the proposal of
Yeah.
like, and trails are upgraded and this and, you know.
And nobody just
It's not
committed
gonna
to any sort of a vote. I think that's important
Right.
to say too. you
Right.
know, we're in the conversation
absolutely.
phase for up until
Yeah.
we vote.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
And I think it's important to note that the meeting on Monday is going to have public comment, and part of this
Focus.
long discussion without public comment is that we've tried making proposals as a dog committee, and we have Alex's proposal coming from the staff. We haven't gotten to talk about it, so we really need to narrow it down so that people have something to comment about in the next week by emailing our group. And by like putting it out there to the town at large too, to talk about it and sit with it for a week. So like, I'm just looking at some of the comments in the Zoom, and it's like, we need something else to put out there that we've accomplished
Are the
something.
Zoom comments gonna be, are they cataloged?
I've been saving most of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder if there are actually 2 proposals for Monday, and one is without times and one is at 10 a.m. based on the things I heard of what people.
So like dotted line zone on, like
Zones
all,
only.
the park is off leash until 10, and after 10, the core dotted is on leash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to put it at 10?
I mean, 9, 10, whatever it is, but I think that
What we just heard, just like what upholds our mission, what we heard from commissioners anyway, was 9, 9, 8, 10, and no times.
Okay, great. Maybe it's 8. Thank you for
maybe
elucidating the
so.
dog commissioners versus
So-
dog committee.
Since this is not a vote, maybe it should just say, these are the ranges. These are the times.
It's basically 8 to
Comment,
10,
8
no
to 10,
towns
8,
or
9,
8 to 10.
or 10.
Yeah.
Comment.
That'll,
I don't know, I
Yeah.
mean, because
Yeah.
otherwise it
Yeah.
kind of feels like
That's
there was
narrow
a decision tonight.
Yeah.
And part of the piece we are missing is information from the public
Feedback.
about when do they
Yeah.
use, we have a lot of anecdotal things about when people go with their dogs and when they don't, and when do we personally, but like, this is the piece that was missing from the
We're gonna
survey
get a
data.
lot more target.
You think?
It would be great, to be
Yeah,
like,
that'll be-
can you please just tell us if this would meet your needs at all, what times, and like. That'd be really
Also,
helpful.
I would add to like what's helpful, like I have a little list that, and I've tried to highlight things from this conversation that are like, no matter what the outcome is, like we need some better signage in the north part of the park. Like people feel lost there. It's not new to this conversation. We heard that when we were doing the management plan. That's in the management plan. You know, people like the more accessible trail. Like there are some things that are like surfacing from this conversation, but are like, no matter the outcome, here's what we need. And I would say that those types of things are also helpful to share. Is that?
Like the
Yeah.
off-leash education idea.
Off-leash education or,
Bringing a leash into the park.
yeah, you must have a leash. Even if
Good
it's
idea.
off leash time, you have to be holding a leash with you. Like that's, you know, those
Part of the
things.
existing canine code of
It
conduct.
is.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Dust
Yeah.
that one off.
Yeah.
I think that if we're gonna put this out to the public, it would be also very helpful. Like, it was great to hear Alex say this is the plan for the fitness trail. So that's how that's gonna change. And like, what else is slated for this summer in the northern end?
Yeah, I can talk about that. That's helpful. I mean, a part of it depends on what, you know, you can throw out proposals, but part of it depends on where the line is, you know, how much effort do we want to go through if people feel like they're satisfied with accessibility before certain times. So it's a little bit hard to like
Totally
give
do
a
it.
proposal that's like, this is what we're gonna do, but things we could do, you know, or that we could
Well, we're
could
gonna, like-
fast track.
Yeah.
Would be like fitness trail, we could fix it up. Let's say we're gonna fix up the fitness trail from the dog park to Seven Fireplaces or to the Seven Fireplaces Road there. And it, you know, it's described clearly in the management plan, what the desired, that's already a project that's in the management plan. It's clearly described what it's desired to look like. So it's right there. We can just pull from that. The Hemlock Hill Trail, I think is long overdue for a complete reroute. So I would like to see that redesigned and redone this summer. And I think we have plenty of help. We can do that without any trouble. So creating that corridor, you know, another option to go into the northern part of the park. It's a short and steep trail, like, you know, I have some ideas for that. I think that needs a little bit more discussion about, you know, how to make that. And to me, that's a low priority because people can walk on a very wide road, you know, down to the new shelter, you know, they can. If you're trying to get to the park, to the off-leash area from Hubbard Park Drive, like the terrain is quite accessible as it is. And then, you know, I think tackling the expansion trails is already on our agenda for this summer, so we're looking at, you know, creating this phase 1A, which goes back to conversations we were having before, but connecting Wyndham Drive to Seven Fireplaces with 2 clear trails that are like named and marked and not going through wetlands, or if they are like being boardwalked and created well, so it's not just a maze of trails in there. So I think those 4 trail projects are, 2 of them are already on our list, 2 of them could easily be put on the list, and then we could take it from there.
Would you feel comfortable just kind of like outlining that on a little one pager we could post to the site,
Sure,
and that would
yeah.
provide some context for people?
Yeah.
Be helpful.
If we were considering time, whether at 8, 9, or 10 in the morning, are we implying that after that morning time, when it's on leash, it's until the park is closed?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to be clear about
Yeah.
that. And the second thing is we're also recommending or saying that the northern section will always be off leash?
Correct.
Are we saying that?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make.
Can I make a quick point about that, though? You know, we can't bind the hands of any future park commission. I mean, I assume we're gonna assess as years go on, and we're gonna maybe make changes, and I'm gonna get accused of slippery slope. But, you know, I'm just saying, there's no way to put in statute, this is it forever.
Can't have a restrictive covenant forever.
And also making clear that like the northern part it's not just like all of a sudden dog free for all, like it's been mentioned already, but like.
All right.
In a code of conduct, there's gonna be more enforcement.
Yeah.
Licenses.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be welcoming for everybody.
Yes.
And
Not just.
Yeah.
can I ask on the northern part, like the deer yard,
Yeah, we should
my
clear.
office is next to Brian Pfeiffer's, and every time he says that all the dogs should chase away all the deer because they're total nuisances and they need to be hunted for. And that the deer yard should not be, you know, like I'm paraphrasing, but like, you know, that the deer yard is not a precious thing and that these deer have become pests and like, it's not like in the summer in particular, it's not a big deal. But like, I think that the deer yard has come up as a point of concern for people who have takes on it in all directions. So I think that if we're looking at the northern section, you know, I think there has been like Deer Yard, Parks Connector, like that place, that trail that goes way out to the stump dump. You know, are those then definitively off leash because we're doing a simple zone solution? And it's either like similar with that vote on the times, it's either all on or all off, and is it all on or all off on all those trails in the north?
Thanks for bringing that up. clarify about the deer yard for the public and everyone else. So the deer yard only applies in deep snow in the winter. And the idea is that in deep snow under hemlocks, there's less snow cover, and so deer can more easily get away from predators. And so that's why the dog on leash sign is there for the deer yard, but it's not clarified that it's only in deep snow, which is something that we experience now very rarely. So there's two issues at play. One is like, what is the deer yard? It really only applies in that situation of deep snow. So let's say for charitably 90% of the year, it's not a non-issue.
Are there a higher number of
that-
pigs in that yard?
Well, I think what you're raising is just one of a number of issues, which is like, yeah, ticks, public park. Do we need more deer in Montpelier? Are we trying to protect deer in Montpelier? They're already protected because there's no hunting, things that Brian is raising. So that is a little bit stickier, and I think we would have to really consult where the line is on, statute versus opinion, and probably is worth doing down the road. But I think the important nugget is like deer yard only applies in the deep snow. So
Like how deep, like?
yeah, I mean, it's in the rule somewhere. We could find it out. Yeah.
That could be added. To
Yeah, you have to measure the deer.
So, like,
Right.
maybe it should be clarified, like, we should snow, or with
Right.
your own leaves. I don't. Powdered.
All right, okay, I feel like we're,
Friends on a powder.
it's 9:00.
Can I clarify one more issue that's been raised in a couple places, which is the State House Trail, which it's not city property, it's state property. And there is a trail on it, and we have an MOU with the state about
What is the MOU?
memorandum of understanding
Mhm.
about that we maintain it. But I think, again, like I feel like we should just set that piece aside because it will require collaboration with the state. It was intentionally left out of the zones because it's too complicated to lump that in. And Becca raised that, and other people have too. It's just that side.
would it be useful to determine now, when we're already in deep talking about dogs, like what our desired is for that, so that if and when it comes up, we're prepared to address that? Because if we don't address that now, what's gonna happen is we'll make these decisions, and then the state is gonna say, hey, should we leash here?
Right.
And then we're gonna be like, oh yeah, let's all talk about the stone tower path. And then make decisions, and the public's gonna say, but that's a slippery slope, and you like already talked about, didn't we already figure this out? Why are we talking about the State House Trail? So I feel like we should have like even if we can't implement it, we should say like, here's what our vision is, and whether the state wants to do it or not, we're at least.
Yeah, and they probably would follow our lead if
Yeah.
if we were like, we want to put in the MOU that this is a on-leash trail only. It might be in there already. I should look at it. I'm not sure.
In which case it
Why don't you
looks,
look at it? Because that could save us a ton of time and discussion. Like if we could start from there. But otherwise,
maybe get some info on that for next week's meeting.
Yeah.
And like just the way this is visually right now, my mental assumption is that the State House Trail is also on leash because it's leading into the on leash, like that just
or you
seems to be
or
how
you have
this.
a short window of using it off leash before the MOU gets completed. Your last hurrah this summer.
Okay, so, the outcome,
So
oh,
clarifying the question, just as we're talking about trails, is there and maybe you said this, sorry, is there a reason the off leash doesn't include the CCB trail and stump dump trail? In my head, I had thought
That might
that would go to
also
the
be
end,
because it's
or do we not
on-
own?
So we don't own that. Well, the stump, just the very northern section there.
The section
Yeah,
go
right
beyond
here.
the orange line.
Yeah. We only own parts of that, so if we wanted to be definitive, we would have to revisit each landowner agreement on there. I think we could extend it somewhat into the stump dump, but it was more of just like a drawing boundaries around land we actually have control over. So. I mean, I assume those, yeah, I don't know. I guess it would probably be safer to assume they would support an on leash than if they, I feel like if I were a landowner and I had a trail across my property, it's more likely they would be pro on leash than off leash, unless they were like unless like if somebody was like, I'm gonna revoke access to the trail unless this dog's off leash, that would surprise me. but.
Right, but if
Yeah.
we don't have to, I mean, current status quo, we wouldn't have to revisit it. Correct? But I mean, there is currently off or canine code of conduct on those trails. I assume.
Yes.
And that wouldn't be a change with this proposal, so
Yeah.
if you just kind of left things as is,
Right.
we can sort of mentally assume that line continues to the end of
Correct,
those
yes,
trails.
yeah, correct.
Okay, so, what we are proposing to the public is that, zones with the dotted line and the possibility of times ranging from no times, which means that dogs would always be leashed in the core, or 8 a.m., off leash until 8 a.m. and then on leash, off leash until 9, off leash until 10. And Alec is going to share a synopsis of the other planned sign improvements and trail improvements and work plan this summer. When we meet next, it's on Monday, May 13th at 5 p.m. And so this was primarily for us, that's for the public, and then we make a decision. So that will be much more public comment. We have a bigger room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
Council chambers.
perfect. So we all get a microphone. Very exciting. And a big chair. Anything else we need to refine on that, we'll have to figure out facilitation and whatnot, but anything else?
This proposal or proposals will be shared just on the website, on Porch Forum,
somebody will
like how will
write
it be
that up.
shared to the public? Yeah.
Yeah, we need to post that.
I could post anything,
Seems useful for a parks commissioner to draft.
yeah, right.
And it probably could be what? Amount of documentation.
I think honestly,
I think it's just gonna be
shorter the better.
Shorter.
Have links probably to all the background documents and then say that here's our final proposals that we're considering.
And if, I know that in previous meetings, you said that you're like, we love the dog committee's proposals, all of them, except, we love all your recommendations except for this 2 to 4, that's not gonna work, but like, yes to education, yes to this, yes to that. It might be worth restating that in the proposal, like.
Agreed.
This is gonna be leashes on roads, at shelters, more education, this, that, and this, like.
Well, that should sure is plenty, which I don't think it's been adopted. But no.
So,
But it's not gonna be relevant for
Yeah.
this drawing, so like, just to
That's-
reinstate the
yeah.
whole, like, this is the
package.
whole package.
Yes.
And Emily,
I can do.
as lead
Oh, sorry.
writer.
You're like a professional writer.
She's a
I know.
professional writer, that's what she does. Yeah.
Comment,
Yes.
the consolidation.
Yes.
So how about if you work on that and let's aim to get it up maybe tomorrow, but maybe more likely on what's today, Tuesday, Wednesday, like by Thursday? Put it up on the city website. And that would give people Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to meet Monday. So
When you post it, maybe stick a thing on Front Porch Forum being like, that's up there.
Yeah, we'll definitely push it out through the
the Facebook and all. Yeah.
Facebook, we'll email all the people on the listserv. So
There's
are we
Instagram.
communicating for, yeah. we
We discussed
yeah,
them at Instagram.
we do. That's good. So are we sort of sticking with the messaging that like we're making a decision next week or are we?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So May 13th is public hearing. And followed by a decision.
Each other. You're cold.
Great, and then.
And
I
then
mean,
May
there's a lot of
21st.
details to figure out as far as like role, like implementation, enforcement. Stuff that has been floating around, but has not been talked about at all.
I think we can ignore all of that
We can
until
make a
we make a
decision.
decision and
Yeah,
then do that, because you have all of that kind of drafted in the works, but I don't think it's going to change, that's not gonna change the decision.
Should we be prepared to talk about it if there is time at the next meeting? I mean, if there's probably gonna be lots of public comment, but if it's not as.
There's nobody wants to say
take as
anything.
much time as it possibly could, should we be prepared to touch on that at least?
In my mind, like the implementation does sort of inform the decision, because it's like, I want something that's gonna be simple to implement in terms of like. The implementation plan, I think that will come after the decision. I don't know if squeezing it into the next week's meeting is gonna be doable, but I'm definitely thinking about what is this gonna look
Yes.
like on the ground?
Yeah.
You know, when I'm make when I decide what I'm voting for.
But we don't necessarily need like a document or a presentation on next week on implementation. We'll decide, and then maybe May 21st, we could say, okay, this is what we decided. Here's all the details on how to implement.
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Yes.
And I think there are some of us on the doc committee who had thoughts about education. and
Yeah.
implementation, and we could like
Please.
throw some
Yeah,
of that
that'd be
brainstorm here.
That'd be great.
Wonderful. That'd be awesome.
So May 20th, I had been potentially imagining that as a different meeting.
Not about
But if we want to stick with this issue, we can just see it through to the end. That's fine. You know, there's the option we didn't do our walking meeting last month because we didn't have quorum.
Are the walking meetings on leash or off leash?
Currently, by current rules,
Currently,
off leash following
yeah.
You send us the implementation plan, we review it ahead of time, we have
I
our.
don't think that would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think the implementation, I mean,
Enforcement is gonna be a big conversation.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't think there's too much to discuss on implementation. We can basically be like, how about this? And you all can be like, great.
Would it be cute if people just call the police?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, enforcement,
Like,
I feel like it merits a further discussion. So we can either do that,
Right.
like, and then, you know, there's. Yeah, if we wanted to walk on the 20th and make progress on that project, that's another.
is it the
option.
20th or the
I think
21st?
it's the 20th.
21st is a
Is it
Tuesday.
Okay, the 21st, yeah.
Okay, and that's a walking meeting?
No, that's what I'm saying is, you know, I'm saying, do we want to do a dog meeting on the 21st for 3 dog meetings in a row, or do we want to go back to the Parks Connector project and walk that? Move that forward, approve like, it's gonna be flagged by then. So we could look at the trail that's flagged, and then we could look at the proposed walking trails as well, which I guess ties into this issue.
I think my question, Ally, for you, like what I heard, part of what made this process feel so rushed at the beginning of April and March was like, we need to get this decision made for the upcoming
So we
field
can
season.
implement.
Now that we're, you know, a month and a half out from that, like realistically, is implementation of this gonna happen this summer? Like,
Yeah.
that's that to me, if I was making this decision, and I'm not, but like if I was about when to have the implementation plan, like, is it more important to talk about the Parks Connector Trail, like just based on your summer?
Yeah, appreciate you
schedule?
bringing that up. And for saying it better than my tired brain is. I think, you know, I just want to be like transparent, like, I definitely wanted to see an advanced timeline for implementation. And I think it's spurred on a lot of this good conversation that has like pushed us past the point that it's really realistic to like fully implement this summer. And like, I feel like we can do our best. But just looking, you know, it's kind of also one of those things, and my disposition is always to think things are easier than they actually end up being. But we're just, I mean, Carrie, yeah.
I just said it's the park motto.
Yeah.
One of them.
We're just buried and adding, you know, I want to do this right. I want to do it thoroughly and,
Well, is
If
there
you-
some advantage where you said you could actually do some of these trail improvements over the course
Yeah.
of the summer, which may actually make it easier to
Mhm.
like swallow and absorb when we.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that could be part of the discussion next week. In terms of like something, you know, creating signs and, you know, just rolling out communications, like that stuff, it just takes time. Like it seems easy, but it takes a lot of time. And then just to have it like, and part of it is a little hard for me to wrap my brain around, like what is the what until there's like a vote and we're like, this is what we're doing. And then we can be like, this is what we can do. And this is when we can do it. And I don't know, yeah.
So based on that, I think, because the question was on May 21st, do we talk about implementation or do a walk and talk about the new trails? I think we give you more time to think through like how this happens on the ground and how do we do it right?
Yeah.
And maybe, Dana, I'm looking at you because you do graphic design, but maybe there's some kind of way to like do some of that work and focus on the new trails, do all the other good work that we do as park commissioners and as park staff and like actually have a regular meeting on the 21st, but a walking meeting. And then maybe in June, say, okay, we've marinated for, here's the plan, here are what some visuals could look like.
Yeah.
How does that sound? Give
Yeah.
everybody a break from this for a meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I initially communicated, like, once June hits, like, we're not adding anything at all. We can't do anything, and that's, June is close. So, we're getting pretty much out of time, so. I still want to commit to, like, doing our best. I wish I could say we could do it, but I don't think I could responsibly say that we can take this whole implementation on before the field season.
Are there elements of it?
And yeah, I think that's the part we have to think through. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking there are parts, especially things that were already in the parks management plan that we were planning to do, like, certain signage that is like around the parking areas, for instance, that's gonna happen. I don't know if that can happen. I'm just saying, like, that an example of something that is gonna happen regardless, that maybe there are some items from that list that we could pick and get done.
I certainly think the public would benefit from having like, there will be a policy, it will go
Yes.
into effect, not tomorrow,
Exactly.
but at this
Yeah.
date. You can think about it, you can start walking some different trails, you can
Right.
see how they are, you can give feedback to the park staff about what you want, like just that process of change is really hard.
Yeah.
And like giving people, like right now, there's just gonna be more freaking out about it because it's still ambiguous.
Yeah, and I think where I'm going is kind of what you're saying is, like, instead of, we were initially talking about, like, posting on May 1st, like, these are the new rules, changes are coming on June 1st, and give us all of May to do it. But like, we might have to be more like, these are the new rules that were voted, like, they're gonna be implemented in the fall or something, give people 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
I recognize that's not what the commission wanted, or, what I certainly communicated we would do, but I think that's kind of where we're at this point.
And in the meantime, I wouldn't doubt that every dog in town will be on their very best behavior between now and then. I feel like this has just surfaced a lot of good dog behavior.
Yeah, no, I think the advanced timeline really helped.
Yeah.
The conversation along, so.
Yeah.
I don't regret that.
Okay, so we meet next week. Emily?
I really, really don't want to say this, but I feel like it needs to at least be aired. If we're delaying implementing, should we delay them?
No.
But we're trying to do it this year.
Yeah.
It's for the fall, not right now. I still think we need a vote.
Be delayed though.
But we need to come up with the best implementation.
Yeah, we need to work on the plan and
for what we
everything
select.
else.
So I think it still makes sense to vote and then
Then-
craft the implementation plan and talk
Agreed.
about enforcement.
Yeah.
And then we'll be ready for prime time come the very, very busy fall season.
Yeah.
Just not the very, very busy summer season.
Sounds good.
All right.
There's been a ton of good work done in the last 2 months, and I think voting now builds on that.
Mhm.
We don't want to
Like,
lose
dropping
momentum.
that ball of energy and picking it back up later, like,
There's just,
yeah.
yeah,
Ton of work.
I think given the history of this issue in this town, that it's like, it's time to just commit. Like,
We could keep talking about it forever.
because like, the thing is that I don't, like, our surveys are 50-50, our votes are 50-50, like, everything is so close, and I guess, yeah, it's time to call it.
Yeah.
And then it lets someone bring a lawsuit or something, but like, it's time to call it.
Time to call it.
All right, on that, it's 9:17 and we are adjourned by unanimous consent.